indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This meeting is being live streamed by Chelmsford Telemedia and posted to the CPS website for interested community members to access and watch. Although we are not allowing for in-person public participation, interested community members were encouraged to submit their names and addresses to Superintendent Lang if they wanted to participate remotely under the public input portion of our meeting. During our public input session, anyone who has joined us through the GoToMeeting platform and expressed an interest in making a comment will be recognized by the superintendent and allowed to speak with the committee. If anyone watching this live has questions or comments to share, they're encouraged to email one of us during the meeting. We will read their questions or comments during our second public input session at the end of the meeting. So welcome to this meeting of the Chelmsford School Committee. Tonight we'll be continuing to review the status of the current teaching and learning models occurring in our schools and discussing possible timelines for potential changes along with some other business items. So our first order of business tonight is approval of the minutes from our last meeting on October 20th.
I move that the school committee accept the minutes of the October 20th meeting.
Second. Motion is second. Okay, any corrections or comments on the minutes? All in favor of approval? Aye. Okay, 4-0. All right, any good news anyone would like to share?
Sure. I'd like to start off first. I received this information from Christy Whittlesey, who is our department coordinator of Fine and Performing Arts. And the Chelmsford Center for the Arts, though, they had sponsored a special online performance called Follow Your Compass, and that was for all our elementary school students last week. And Follow Your Compass is a pro-kid character building show where students explore empathy and social courage while also thinking about conflict resolution skills. It also aligns with a lot of our district goals that we have here right now, and Susan Gates and the CCA board were so welcoming and put this together for our students, so we'd like to thank them for that. Today was Professional Development Day for our teachers, so lots of different activities were happening in the district. And over the past, last week and through the weekend, we had some awesome Halloween celebrations for the students. I'm not going to take everybody else's ideas around, so I want to make sure I pass the good news over. I'm going to start with Jeff and let him share a little bit about the Lime Club.
This Saturday between 11 and 1:30, the Lime Group, Leadership in Motion Everywhere at the high school, under the leadership of Tammy Leary and Matt Bartos, had a drive-through trick-or-treat. And it was huge. They raised money and donations for the food pantry and for the Table of Plenty, and they had 4 minivans full of food to donate to those two organizations, and people went through, didn't have food, made financial donations, and they got $250 to share between the two activities. Parents who were there of the Lyme students were sent constantly off to Walmart and everywhere else to resupply for the candy, because I guess it looped all the way around Harrington, down the access road, and, Matt and Tammy did a great job, and the kids, as always, with the Lyme, did a fantastic job, and everything they do towards the ultimate goal to charity in the community, so it was a huge success.
Okay, anybody else have good news?
Are we doing the Battle of the Booze?
Sure,
Yeah, go ahead.
sure.
We'll share this one. Donna and I got the pleasure of judging Battle of the Booze. I'll start off by saying the pumpkin contest, the carvings were incredible. It was a collaboration between Byam, Harrington, and Chips. You get to do the cars.
Oh, the cars were incredible, very creative, very well decorated. It was a really tough job trying to pick out the 3 top, decorated cars, because people really put a lot of time and effort into, their trunks. So I would say that the first place winner was a woman from the CHIPS program. I believe she's a custodian there. And she had like a barnyard set up of all of these animals that she had made herself out of recycled materials. So
amazing.
it was incredible. But everybody really did a nice job. And there was some good community participation as well. The Table of Plenty had a trunk there, and some other programs as well. So it was really terrific to see.
And they had community sponsors, businesses that sponsored them to do this. So they were able to give out a bag with goodies to each child that came by. So it was really excellent. So that was very good news. The collaboration part, I think, is amazing.
It's really kind of nice to see that despite the fact that we, the circumstances are not ideal, and certainly not what we're used to. People have really found very creative ways to engage the students, families, and community members in some really great activities.
Great.
So it's been terrific.
All right, anybody else? Okay, great. All right, so we are now to our first public input part of our meeting. As mentioned a few minutes ago, anyone who wanted to participate in tonight's public comment needed to email Superintendent Lang and then log in to GoToMeeting. For those that are speaking tonight, I would ask you to try to limit your comments to 3 minutes so everyone has an opportunity to speak. Also remember that this comment period is for items listed on tonight's agenda. Although we will not be responding directly to your comments during this part of the meeting, we'll try to address them when we get to that item in the agenda. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Superintendent Lang.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. We've actually had 2 registered speakers for this evening, Lauren Cochran and Katie Sullivan. I'm not sure which one wanted to go first, but either one, if you just unmute your mic, and then you can speak regularly, and I'll try to adjust the volume just to make sure we're all hearing you well.
Before they speak, are we streaming this live on Chelmsford Telemedia, TV.org? Because we were getting some emails that people aren't seeing it for some reason.
Oh, it's supposed to be.
Okay. I'm not sure what the problem is, but,
Want me to go check?
Yeah, maybe Joanna can go take a
okay.
peek for us.
All right, but I don't want people to miss out on the public input, so,
Yep. No, I do know it's being recorded, and it was supposed to be live broadcast,
Okay.
but Joanna can go take a peek.
See us up there. We're up.
Okay, Lauren, you're good to go.
Okay, thank you very much. Shall I wait, or I'm good to go?
No, I think you're
All right.
good to go because I can see you on the feed here, and the volume seems to be fine now.
You have to give a name and address,
All
sir.
right.
Oh, yeah, you just have
thank
to state your name and address.
Yes, Lauren Cochran, 46 Augusta Way, Chelmsford, Massachusetts, and also I teach at the high school. And I hope you all notice the pearls, and you know why we're all wearing pearls today. Now I'll continue. Dear members of the school committee, Dr. Lang and Dr. Hirsch, thank you for providing the opportunity for our union voices to be heard. As the new president of the Chelmsford Federation of Teachers, Union 3569, I wanted to introduce myself to you and to let you know that it is my goal to have 100% membership with every staff person who qualifies under the AFT umbrella. We also want you to know that our union is here to make sure that the students of Chelmsford Public Schools have the best education they can possibly have. The heart and soul of a good education is made from the students and staff that work with each other on a daily basis. From custodians to paraprofessionals, to secretaries, to nurses, to faculty. These are the people that mold children into educated, intelligent, well-rounded individuals. These are the people in the trenches doing the daily work of taking care of the youth of Chelmsford in these unprecedented times. Therefore, it is of utmost importance that the administration, the school committee, and the union work together for solutions to the very new but real concerns. It is also important that we make sure our union members stay safe and healthy in order to better serve the students of Chelmsford. There are many concerns that hopefully will be handled outside of the school committee meetings, but we wanted to share just a few of these concerns to let you know the current climate of the schools. Because all schools are severely short-staffed due to many staff members out on leave, paraprofessionals, specialists, and others are being assigned duties not under their job descriptions, and they are suffering. Students are suffering without licensed teachers in their subject matter. All faculty are severely overstressed and are requesting more prep time. The Human Resources Department instructed several teachers to use their sick days early on when they weren't sick, before teachers were told if they were Tier 1 or Tier 2. Teachers are now running out of sick days and will need them if or when they are sick. Very few Tier 1 and Tier 2 teachers were given remote assignments. Some teachers are concerned with staff and students not wearing masks. Protocols have not always been followed. There are a few teachers who have students who are not 6 feet apart. There are even paraprofessionals who have nowhere to sit in the class and are unable to socially distance. There are major technology issues ongoing in schools. Teachers seem to have less problems working from home, yet most have been denied working in the afternoons from home, even though home networks are often more reliable, and these teachers were Tier 1 and Tier 2. Teachers are looking forward to the holidays, but have hopes of working remotely for some time to quarantine in order to spend much needed family time. Also, snow days should be looked at, and there should be under discussion. Are they going to be remote or just snow days? There are currently 17 grievances filed by the union. And finally, nobody likes the hand sanitizer. Sorry, they say it's very difficult. These are just some of the many concerns we hope to work out with the current administration. We know that if we work together, we can get through this together. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lauren. Lauren, if you want, just because we are having sound issues, so if you mute, then Katie can unmute. And Katie, you're welcome to just state your name and address, and you have the floor.
Okay. Katie Sullivan, Katy, 7 Robinwood Road, Littleton, Massachusetts, 01460. For those of you who don't know me, I have been a member of the Social Studies Department at CHS since 1996. I just wanted to take a moment to introduce myself in the new role I now have with the CFT. As Vice President of the Union, I do believe the most important job is to represent the staff of this local, as well as to continue to have open and honest communication with administration. I'm hoping that the school committee is coming to realize that the current schedules that are running at all 3 levels are not sustainable long-term. One of the reasons for that is the sprinkling issue. I'm hoping the administration realizes the importance of creating a remote academy sooner than later. The staff are working under the guidelines of the MOU, and the union wants the administration to do so as well. I want to assure our members that the Human Resource Department is informed and knowledgeable with the language of FMLA, the Family First Act, and the CARES Act. While there are many more concerns members have, I know you would all like to get home and watch the election results. Thank you for your time tonight, and please note that I realize the most important job for all of us is to continue to provide an outstanding education to all students of Chelmsford. Have a good night.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Katie.
Thank you.
All right, that it?
I think
Just two?
that's it
Okay.
for that front.
Great.
Just 1 second.
Yep.
Just so Katie and Lauren, if you're still listening on the link, we basically close the link at this point, and then if you want to join the meeting, you can just kind of watch on the Chelmsford YouTube telemedia. It is being broadcast, but we close the link to just not have feedback on the mics. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Good night.
Hey.
Good night.
Good night.
Sorry about that.
That's
but
fine.
It's just easier to get that
Yeah,
down.
yeah.
And then we don't have the reverberation on the mics. Great.
You ready to roll?
Yeah, I'm ready to roll.
All right, on to new business, fall reopening discussions and updates.
Yep, we have just a bunch of updates. I had met with Dennis a little bit earlier last week when we were planning the agenda for the meeting. And again, we're now really into the full swing of the school year. It's amazing, it's already November, and things are still rolling along. But a couple of updates for you with regard to some of the major topics. So with regard to our facilities and PPE, because I know that's a question that comes up from time to time, we really have no issues with PPE. We're stockpiling plenty. We have not had any issue receiving it. I do know some districts have. The hand sanitizer is not my favorite either, but it does meet the requirements that you have to have in the schools. We always look for better and more usable products, but I just want you to know we're doing very good on PPE. Brian and Joanna just approved kind of another round of purchasing. We're basically trying to stockpile 2 to 3 months. So the latest orders that are going in are going to take us through the winter. So again, just PPE-wise, when it comes to gloves, masks, the one thing we're going through a little quicker than we thought, I think, was some of the gowns and face masks. But no shortage. We have them in stock, and we have orders in. So PPE-wise, I think we're doing very well. Schools, I'm actually very impressed with the cleanliness of the buildings, and I know a few people brought in this earlier. We have our regular cleaning crews in the schools, our own custodians that we employ during the school day, augmented by cleaning companies that clean our buildings at night. And then we've actually amended our contracts to have extra contracted cleaners during the school day, going around cleaning some of those high-touch surfaces, areas in the buildings. They're doing a phenomenal job. I happened to notice last Friday when we were doing the weekly announcement, we tried to put different pictures of the kids in the schools. It happened to be the Halloween theme. But even when you look behind the kids in the schools, I mean, the floors are shining. The door handles are being treated, so we've really received very good feedback from the facilities. On that note, I know Donna had mentioned a couple of items. One, we are now starting to prepare for winter, so it is getting colder. One of the things that did come up was at, say, the high school, the kids, students, will, come in and out of the building. We have a lot of one-way hallways. What's going to happen come winter time? Obviously, snow is going to be an issue. We're going to have to shovel and keep all of our entryways open. Kids will still, come in and out of the buildings like they always do. They'll wear shorts to school. I don't get that, but kids will do that in the winter time. It happens. But we will convert some of the hallways in the school. They're not overcrowded now because of the number of students we have in the buildings to two-way hallways where we have to. And just kind of monitor that traffic so that the kids aren't congregating. But I really don't have any significant concerns on that front. We did as part,
I'm sorry, so that will eliminate that outside traveling that they have to do?
well, they won't have to,
Okay,
but I think a lot of students still will.
okay,
So, obviously, if you have snow, you've got to clean out the snow to keep the doorways open anyway.
right,
I do think you're going to see even staff and students still kind of go outside just to get a little bit of air.
right,
But they won't have to.
okay,
So the hallways will be reconfigured so that you do have two-way traffic, but you'll be, kind of pushed to move along. They won't be kind of lingering in the hallways. And we won't try to have the different groups interacting with each other.
thank you.
Another issue that had come up even this past winter, this past summer to kind of put on your radar was, building HVAC issues. We're now transitioning from our fall season into the cold weather and heating. So all of our systems are up and now running for heat for the winter time. We've had a couple of cold mornings and, heat is now in play in the schools. In talking to Brian today, last week we had a couple of cold mornings, did not have any issues systemically with heat. I think we're actually in very good shape. If you take a look at last year's, even like heat calls and any kind of heat issues we had, they were one-off type situations. You're always going to have a valve that fails, a particular pump that needs to be replaced, things along those lines. But I'm not anticipating any huge issues. One further step that we did take, we'll be receiving the results hopefully soon, and I know the union had asked about this as well, was air quality in the buildings, how much time fresh air is being introduced to classrooms and things like that. The town did contract with companies to come in and help us with that testing and assessment. So there were actually two different firms. There's an engineering firm that prepares a spec for an actual testing company to come out and comply with. They go through the buildings, they take a look at our univents. One of the issues we wanted to make sure is, do we have, a sufficient enough rating on the filters and things like that in the different buildings? Are the actuators on the units working so that they're bringing in enough fresh air into the classrooms? Is the circulation happening properly? So that testing company has come in and they actually completed their work last week. It was either Thursday or Friday. They made it through all the schools to do their testing. They've now given that information back to the engineering firm. And I would think before Thanksgiving, over the next 2 or 3 weeks, we'll receive the preliminary reports from the engineering firm. We'll then work with DPW, sit down, take a look at any recommendations that might come from them. If it did include, recommend an increased filter, or if something came out where a particular unit wasn't functioning properly, we needed to have more fresh air coming in from the outside, the control might have to be tweaked to help the mechanical piece work. So we'll get all of that feedback. As with everything else we're doing, we're going to be very transparent about that. So, the reports will be made available to the school committee, can certainly have them, but to staff and either town as we try to work through any issues that come up. But I think that should make people feel comfortable that that is ongoing.
Can we have Gary Persichetti or Kathleen Canavan come to that meeting as we go through that report, just kind of explain it to us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Gary and Kathleen would be good. I think Melissa Joyce is also the new energy person for the town. She's wonderful. So we could have her come as well and just talk through the reports, because there are different contractors that we even use, the town uses in-house to help with little fixes. So the engineers will have to kind of talk with each other in their terms and then, kind of put it into English for us to figure out, what we should be considering for recommendations to system enhancements and fixes and things like that. So We haven't had that previously, though. So, I mean, I think this is a step in certainly a good direction to have all that data going into the heating season. I think if anything, that's going to help maybe even troubleshoot or preemptively address a potential mechanical failure down the line. So as soon as we have those reports, we'll certainly, share those and be able to talk about any recommendations that come from them.
And these are all our buildings?
Yes, so what they did is basically, they tested a percentage of each of the buildings, but every single one of our buildings. Typically what happens is they'll test about 25% of the learning spaces. And the thought process behind that is that typically, say at an elementary school, we have 4 classrooms at each grade level, and they're all in the same area or the same wing of the building. So if you're doing 25%, typically one of those classrooms will be checked. And again, for what they're going in to check for, it's the univent itself, the filtering of the particular univent. So whatever the recommendation for one unit is, that recommendation is going to carry forward for the other ones. What they want to test is, how much free and fresh air is being introduced to the classroom. We need to be able to control those dampers too, because the other, for all practical purposes, is as much as you want to have fresh air coming in on a below freezing day, that it takes you that much longer to get the air tempered for the classroom, and it's a balancing act. It really is, but that's going to be ongoing. But I think we're going to get very good data from that 25% of the spaces in the buildings. And obviously, if we see a particular issue in a particular wing or an area, we can always go back and do further assessments of that. But typically, that's what you'll do. You'll assess a percentage of the rooms. And we really, like I said, we should be getting those reports very soon.
Okay.
Any other questions on facilities or PPE or?
Just a couple. Are we doing enough with kids around mask hygiene? So if they're wearing the cloth masks, make sure that they're washing them, frequently, or, if they're using the disposable masks, that they're changing them every day. Just to make sure, as I said, I think that I assume that that's happening.
Right.
I assume the kids know that they should be doing that, but it might be worth just as a reminder
Yeah.
to kids. Don't throw it in your backpack and then take it out the next day. Put it back on again.
Yeah, I don't know, to be honest with you. I mean, I know that, replacement mask like we're wearing, typically is thrown away at the end of the day, and you get a new mask the next day. I am surprised at how many, students are bringing their own masks from home. We haven't been hit with having to provide, like, district-provided masks as much as I thought we would have. I can speak for like my own kids. I don't know, one's in high school and a couple are in college, but they're pretty good. I mean, they go out during the day, they wear their mask to work, and it's almost like it gets thrown in the laundry bin and, it gets laundered for the next time. I haven't heard that as an issue, but I don't mind in one of our upcoming newsletters.
It's more from my own experience, but, I would just say that I think the kids have been excellent about wearing masks, just making sure that they're actually taking care of those masks,
Right.
That they are wearing it, But, I think obviously, based on some of the feedback that we heard earlier, I think we do have to take a look at making sure that they are consistently wearing the masks and following those protocols, but, so it's getting colder, okay, and, we've had the luxury of being able to keep the windows open in classrooms and things like this. Now that we're having to close them, I'm sure that the report that we're gonna be getting is helpful, but, one of the things that, we've been getting feedback on is that, families are being told to dress your kids warm because we're going to keep the windows open. What are our protocols around that? Or do we have any? Are we recommending that windows stay open? Because once it gets cold, it's cold, and it's really hard to learn and function.
Nothing dissimilar from other years. So as a district, we're not recommending that people keep their windows open.
Okay.
And again, if you've heard that, or if you hear it, please pass it along so I can do legwork on that. I'll tell you that, like, during the fall, when we've had, really unseasonably warm weather, classroom windows have been open.
Right.
Again, we haven't had much cold weather, but, yesterday I was not seeing, like, many windows open in the buildings. I think the big issue is gonna become, it's that balancing act. You wanna introduce fresh air to the rooms. I think at the end of this week, we're talking the high 60s, we might even hit 70.
Right.
I can see the windows being open again.
Right.
But no, as a district, we're not encouraging people to keep the windows open like all winter and dress warmly. I think other than, there is always messaging. I joked earlier about, like, the kids with the shorts on. There is messaging just around, please, dress appropriately. It is winter. how it is. I mean, you go to my classroom and you might be kind of cold. If you go to Jeff's classroom, that might happen to be a little bit hotter classroom. So I do always kind of, even on my own kids, have them, bring a sweatshirt or, because you might be hot somewhere, cold somewhere else. It's not perfect. Regulation-wise, it's not, 68 degrees everywhere. But no, nothing out of the ordinary. I wouldn't expect windows to be kept open. What'll be interesting in those HVAC reports is just to see exactly how much fresh air is being introduced to the classrooms, because really you'd want that to be recycling itself enough. So I'm not seeing that as an issue, but it's something we can follow up on.
I have two more, but I don't know.
All right, anybody else have a question in the interim? Go ahead, Donna.
With regards to hot water,
Yeah.
are we absolutely sure that every restroom has, adequate hot water in the, staff rooms and in the kids' bathrooms? I think in the kids' bathrooms, there's probably a regulator that doesn't allow it to become too hot.
Yeah, particularly at our elementary schools. The water is tempered because you just don't want scalding water to particularly hit the elementary kids. And a lot of times they have like the push valve that'll bring in the hot and cold water together at the faucet. There are some buildings where if the bathroom, it really just depends on how far down the line. And this doesn't typically happen in the like the bigger student bathrooms, but like a one-off single stall bathroom. If it's further down the line from the hot water tank, sometimes you do have to run the water for a few seconds before the hot water kind of gets in there, depending on how quickly the last person was in. But yes, I'm not concerned about hot water. We haven't had that as a significant issue. I did ask Brian at the high school. There was an issue with a particular hot water tank in the science room that had been replaced. There was a mixing valve issue on that, but that had been remedied. And what I always recommend is if a staff member in the building is, or a student, if you're having a particular issue, you've got to let the senior custodian in the building know, because ultimately they're the ones that input the work ticket to have something be addressed. So if you come across something that's not working, or if you want to have it repaired, that's really the person to go to, so that they can get a ticket in the system, and either the town can respond, or if it's a private contractor that has to respond. Things will break from time to time, but that's really the course of action. But aside from that one area, which I know was rectified at the high school, and that was the science labs, no, I think the high school is fine. The two middle schools, up until today, I have not heard anything McCarthy-wise, and Brian wasn't aware of anything significant at Parker. He was looking into that today as well. But if there is something, you've really got to let your custodian know, so that they can get that ticket in.
I want to make sure that we can also track those tickets, because, especially if we're seeing, common problems among the buildings or in one particular building. This isn't the time to add to people's stress by having the environment that we're working in not be conducive to either teaching or learning for the kids. So I think whatever we can do to make sure that people have what they need, and that, we're doing everything we can to make sure that the air quality is good, that they have the supplies that they need, and, that we're doing the cleaning, especially as the numbers continue to rise. And if it's not necessarily in Chelmsford, I think we actually went down a little bit last week, but just,
Right.
It's stressful, and you and I talked about this, just listening to the news, and they're talking about record numbers. So I think whatever we can do to, as I said, maintain a healthy environment is going to relieve the stress on both families and, our staff. So I think that has to be one of our number one priorities.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I do think we have to just keep hitting home. It starts with, we can track the ticket, but we can't track anything unless
Right.
the ticket's in the system.
Right.
So if a staff member has a concern, they've got to bring it forward, and they've got to bring it forward to the right person. You've got to let your custodians know if you have an issue so that they can enter the ticket. But we have a mechanism for tracking that once it gets in.
Okay.
So if a staff member has an issue with something in the facility or something with PPE, any of this, what is the protocol? Where does the individual go to make this report? Is there for example, we have an officer for sexual harassment claims or whatever. In this type of environment, is there a particular person assigned at the schools where folks can go and say, okay, you know what, we're not getting enough hand sanitizer every day, we're not getting the masks that we need, whatever it is. Is there a particular person to file a complaint with?
Yeah, so even during the like non-COVID times, if you're ever having an issue with a building need, whether it's something that's broken that needs to be fixed, or if there's an enhancement that's necessary, in your classroom, the teacher is supposed to report that to the building custodian. So they're our employee. So that senior building custodian in each of the schools is the one who would enter the request for either repair or a supply or whatnot in the ticketing system. And then the senior custodians, they work with the principals in the building on like a day-to-day oversight basis, but they all report to Brian Curley, our facilities director, for more like facilities needs. So Brian would then see the ticket entered into the system, and he could tell, is this just kind of like a want or prioritize something? But like in the case of, say, like no hot water, or, if we had a split heating coil and a particular classroom wasn't getting heat, Brian can triage that and immediately contact the town to have something be repaired. They could work with the vendor to get something repaired if we couldn't handle it in-house. When it comes to, say, the PPE and things like that, again, Brian is the one that's kind of controlling that inventory and shipping it out to the schools. So let's say a particular teacher in a school, needed gloves. I'm just throwing that out there. And they went to their custodian to get them, and the custodian happened to be out that day. They would just contact Brian, and then Brian would have gloves sent over to the school. So he's the one that, kind of controls our inventory on that. But it all starts with notifying that custodian at the building so that the ticket can go in.
So-
They're the point of contact for any kind of building repair.
So at a
or building
place
need.
like the high school, which is pretty large.
Yep.
It's one custodian is in charge of receiving all of those.
Well, Charlie is the senior at the high school, and the high school is large, so
Yes, it
there are
is.
3 custodians there. You technically could tell one of the other 2, and they will let Charlie know to enter it in the ticket. But most of the teachers at the high school just know to email Charlie, and then he enters it into the system, and then Brian would see it.
Okay, I just want to make sure that there's a consistent way that, folks can actually make these reports and that they know that that's the way to go.
Right.
Because I've heard things like, we can't get a mask. Well, okay, where is it available in the school that you can immediately request that somebody either bring you one or you go get one? Those type of things, or if people can keep extras in their room. It is a very large building.
Right.
So, I don't know how that's being done within the building, but I would just want to make sure that they can easily get access to these things.
Yeah, I mean, every school, like I said, kind of has that system to go through. There is absolutely no shortage of any PPE people would need.
Right,
It's
you
just a
said
matter of asking for it and having it be given to you.
It might be worth having building administrators just reach out to their staff and say, look, if you have a need for this is who you should contact, or go about, getting these materials, or, a reminder on the help tickets, email the custodian or whatever, because, sometimes, things change from year to year, and sometimes we lose track of who it is that we're supposed to contact or whatever, and additionally, people have a lot on their plates right now, so sometimes it's just a good reminder to have. I think whatever we can do to be consistent between the schools, too, I think will also relieve some stress on families, making sure that we're sending the same message, home from, the middle schools and the elementary schools and the high schools. Obviously, they're different buildings and, demographics, I get that, but, we want to make sure that the protocols that we're putting in place around health and safety are consistent from building to building.
Right.
And, I think that whatever we can do will just help reassure people.
Right. No, I agree with you. And again, like when it then jumps into the health and safety realm, like Peggy Gompa, school nurse coordinator, she would jump in, and she's excellent with regard to kind of
she has been.
streamlining across the schools what our responses are, how to handle certain situations. So the pieces really are there. And if you are hearing, one-off type things, or if you want me to explore something, I'm more than happy to do that. Just let me know and I can look into it. But there are systems in the different schools to report that, and I have not heard those concerns, that,
Okay.
that there's not a PPE, or people didn't know how to report something. So let me know if you're hearing that, because that's not the experience that I'm having.
Yeah, like I said, I think sometimes just the reminder is,
I think
it's
it
just
would
good.
be good.
It's just good to have,
Because if I was going into a place and I just needed PPE, I would not think of going to the head custodian, to be quite honest with you.
Right.
So they must be used to the system, because I wouldn't.
Well, yeah,
That's-
but I mean-
I would think of going to the nurse's office, or,
Every school has communicated to their staff who to
Okay.
go to if they need PPE and how to get it, and if you run out, how to get it. That was communicated at the beginning of the school
Okay,
year.
just
So, again,
a reminder might be good.
yeah, I can make a note of that, but
Yeah.
people really should at this point know who they should be going to.
So in terms of facilities, the other thing that I've heard is, and I wonder if we've, just to make sure that this is actually true, that every nurse's office in every building, does it have access to a sink, an actual running water sink?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, just to make sure, because I think at McCarthy, that was an issue at one time, and I had heard that, it still wasn't fully functional, and it's an older building, and it has, so just to make, if you can, just check
Yeah,
into that.
I'll find out tomorrow, but I mean, I don't want
So
to
you
have
can
people
buy
be
a
concerned.
portable one.
The nurse's office at McCarthy was moved this year because
Okay.
they had to get, we have to have like 2 spaces. You've got the nurse's office
Yeah.
for like seeing your regular patients, and then you also have to have like a COVID room in the event that someone was suspected of COVID. So we relocated the nurse's office in that school, kind of down near
Okay.
the ramp that goes to the gymnasium on the left.
Okay.
But it got relocated to an area that has sinks. So,
Just to make sure,
yeah, I don't know. I'll follow up for you, but I'm
yeah.
99.9% sure. I know that's where it is, but we wouldn't have moved it to an area without water.
Yeah, just to make absolutely sure.
All right, anything else on facilities? Okay, next thing, transportation?
Yeah, if Joanna can just give us a little update on some of our transportation numbers.
Thank you. So ridership has
for the
increased
next
just a little bit since our last meeting. We have 952 riders in grades K to 8, and there's 29 buses taking those riders. And then for the high school, we have 64 riders taking these like shuttle buses, if you will, from the, we started out with 12 stops. We're using 11 because one didn't have anybody sign up. So right now, we're running the 11 shuttles.
Great. Yeah. And that seems to be going pretty well. Even adding, reducing down to the 1 mile, I think satisfied a lot of the kind of parent requests and parent needs. Knock on wood, 2 months later, it's been pretty, I know you hate when I do that. It's been very, pretty seamless this year with transportation. I know it's been very difficult having the limited capacity on the buses. Our bus staff, our bus drivers, I know they're contracted, but we consider them staff, they're working very hard this year. And, Peter and Joanna and the transportation group have been really trying to be extra accommodating to people. And I think by cutting it to the mile really helped quite a bit. And people really do appreciate the fact that there's no fee this year. So we know this is a difficult and financially tough year for a lot of our families. I think people are very appreciative of the service that they're getting and the fact that we're able to do it without a fee.
Yeah, I've received a couple of emails just saying how creative they thought the solution for the high school was, and I think it was a creative idea. As more people might take advantage of that, do we know if there are any stops that we should have, that maybe we don't, that would help more people? We don't know that, right? It's hard to figure it out.
I think that, the hard part is, we'll know more if we end up making modifications to, like, the schedules in the schools. Even we're gonna talk a little bit later during the day, like, if you had picked fully remote because transportation was a barrier to you coming to school, you wouldn't be riding a bus right now. So when we actually make those transitions, if someone was fully remote and now there's a bus available, so now they're gonna come to school in person, we might
Then
see
we'll
those
know.
64 or 65 kids jump up a little bit. We really won't know until then, but it's something that we're mindful of. And even like to Joanna's point earlier, what we're looking to do if the numbers just don't keep growing is you might have a bus on an outskirt of town that basically is driving by another stop on the way in. So we can consolidate a little bit, as long as we tell the kids ahead of time, we're picking up 7:45 at spot A, it's gonna be 5 minutes later, and that same bus will then pick you up at stop B and kind of head closer to the high school. We don't want to get into a situation where it's like regular bus service, though, because we have a very limited window to get these shuttle runs into the high school and to get those buses off to really servicing the middle schools. But I do think it was a good effort to try to accommodate some of the high school riders. Again, I think the ones that are riding it are appreciative, and we really won't know what the capacity request will be until we do those transitions.
Yeah.
Because I just don't know how many kids picked remote because they didn't have transportation.
Well, I personally would like to thank you for thinking it up and doing it, so, because I know it's helped quite a few people.
Definitely a P plus.
I appreciate it.
All right, any other questions on transportation? Great. All right, next, the technology update.
Yeah, thank you very much. Quick update on technology. I know this is something we've been talking about. I just threw a couple of these up on the screen here. Bill had sent us an email, and I forwarded this to you today. But we do have actually a significant amount of new technology in the district that's already arrived, and it's been installed, and it's in use right now. We ordered 80 of the new ClearTouch interactive TVs. Those have all come in. They came in a little bit before Columbus Day weekend. They were brought on site, installed, and that basically allowed us to add the interactive TVs at grades K and 1 at the elementary school level, because we had them in 2, 3, and 4. And then at the middle school level, we had them in 5th and 6th grade, because those were the 2 years for the one-on-one initiative, and we were able to add them in 7th and 8th grade. So I think that was very well received, and those are in the buildings. Bill was also able to add additional webcams and microphones to the existing ClearTouches we have, as well as the new ones. And then we did have 1,000 Chromebooks deployed for the one-on-one initiative, so that took care of the incoming 5th and 9th grade students. So every 5, 6, 9, and 10 grade student in the district does physically have a district-issued device at this point. Upcoming technology, and these are the purchases that are in the works. It's really just a scheduling issue at this point. We have utilized a combination, and Bill mentions this later, of our own CARES Act money for the kind of reopening of school. The town received a CARES Act grant. They've been very generous and allowed us to use some of the town CARES Act money, as well as Bill had applied for a couple of different technology grants and received them. One was a matching grant that we're actually matching with the town's CARES Act money. So all in all, I want to say, you know, we're probably talking $1.5 million to $2 million of new technology being infused in the district. This additional 115 interactive panels, and those are all available. So I would anticipate, I don't want you to hold me to this, but you know, over the next number of weeks, they'll start to arrive. But I think it's safe to say between now and Christmas, before we go out on break, that those devices will likely be deployed into buildings. That's going to take care of really the rest of our educational spaces that didn't have them. And this is something that would have taken us years to really be able to do. But this will outfit all the rest of the classrooms at the high school with the interactive TVs, and even some of the smaller rooms where you wouldn't normally put a TV in, we're going to be able to have that. The second piece of this is some of our older units are now 2 years old, which still isn't you know, that old in the scheme of things, and we're looking to get about 5 or 6 years out of a device. Those were actually, at the time, installed and affixed to the classroom wall. So if you're in like the modular classrooms at the elementary as an example, those units are affixed. So you really are limited with what you do in the classroom as far as group manipulation. As well as at the elementary level in the the 5th grade level. I'm not sure about the 6th grade. A lot of them have them actually on the walls. So we're having this company actually retrofit them, so they're going to remove them from the wall and put them on this new stand. So if you're out in the schools and you see the mobile stand, that has been huge. I know that the staff really appreciate that, because they're solid, they can move them around the whole classroom, and those have been really well received. So this is going to take a little bit longer, because at least we already have the technology, but they're going to go in and basically remove it from the wall. On the wall, they're going to, because there's a hole now, so they're going to replace take the bracket down and put up a whiteboard for the teacher. All teachers like extra whiteboard space, so hopefully we won't get any complaints on that. And they'll then have a mobile unit in their classroom. 3-4 years down the line, when we have to replace that TV, we've already purchased the stand. All we'll have to do is basically affix the new interactive TV, and we'll be able to have that. So I think that's huge. Bill was able to pull that off too, and work with his vendors, so I think that was really positive. We've been talking about this for a while, and we still have our student Chromebook order hopefully coming in again November, December-ish, so we're on track for that. One of the things that I did, we were originally talking 2,000 units. I did tell Bill that he could go ahead and order 3,000 units. I don't want to get in a situation next spring like we were in this fall, not being able to get availability of stock when we look to do next year's rollout for the incoming 5th and 9th grade. So I told them, well, we had the funding, let's go ahead and let's actually just purchase the computers now. So we increased the order from 2,000 to 3,000. So we will actually get all 3,000 in at the same time. Because again, I don't know what's going to happen with the availability of stock. I still think, we're ahead of the curve as far as other districts in getting this, but I don't want to be in the back end of the ordering again. So financially, we could swing it with the different grants, and again, with the town helping out with some of the purchase through their CARES Act. So we're actually going to have 3,000 units. So that's very good, and I'll report on that. I know we've been talking about this. As soon as they come in, I'll be able to let you know. And then lastly, I personally haven't seen these yet, but people are very excited about them. I guess these are bigger interactive panels, but they're bulkier and they're particularly built out for the bigger phys ed spaces in the district. I haven't seen them, so I'm going to have to go see one. But so we have 6 of these coming in for each of the elementary schools, and then the high school. I guess the middle schools had them, and they had piloted them and really liked them. So this is one piece of technology I have personally not seen, so I do have to get out and see it. But I guess it's being very well received, and the teachers who use them like them.
Is this because the middle schools already have them?
No, this is a special device. It's like a beefier device for the gym. Because
Oh, it's for gyms.
It's
Okay.
specifically for the gymnasium because the room is bigger, the acoustics are different,
Yeah.
and it's
But
got to
you've
be a
got
little bit more.
6.
Yeah, the middle schools already had them, they pilot them.
Say that again, I'm
The
sorry.
middle schools already have them.
That's
They
what I
pilot 'em.
wondered, yeah.
So we're doing 1 each for the
Okay.
elementary.
So
and
the
then-
middle schools have them.
And then 2 at the high school, but I guess they were so well received at the middles that
Yeah.
we're now going to put them at the elementary and the high school.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that wouldn't have been something on our radar, but as we're doing the remote teaching, I think the staff are finding them very useful. So those are our big kind of, tech updates. And once we get, again, a little bit more of this stuff in, we'll have Bill in for an update and answer any questions you have about the way things are going.
Okay. I have a question about technology for the staff. So these 3,000 Chromebooks that are going to come in, if there's a staff member or a para, I'm including everybody in staff, who does not yet have a Chromebook assigned to them, are there folks in that position? And would they be only receiving them once these 3,000 come in?
Yeah, it's my understanding that any of the laptops that we have in the district were made available to kids first. All of the kids got the devices. Any extra devices we had, staff could check out at the school level. And I do believe most teachers and paras have just taken the extra devices, they're student devices, but they've taken the extra student devices for the time being at the libraries in their schools. So I have not personally heard of any teacher who does not have availability of a device. I have no more devices. So if there is someone out there that, say, is using a student device or is using a desktop and would prefer a laptop, I have no ability to give them a laptop until this order comes in.
Until this comes in. Because I do know some students, and I know this personally, my kids have their own devices,
Yep.
their own Chromebooks. And they're not able to use them for testing because they can't lock all the other features and so on. So they had to go and get an issued device from the school in order to be able to do testing.
Okay.
And they were available.
Okay.
There were some, and this is just in the past couple of weeks.
Yep.
So, does that mean we have more of those available in case there are other students in the same situation?
Yeah,
You've reserved some?
Yeah, I haven't heard that we've run out. So again, we took care of all the kids who were in the hybrid.
Uh-huh.
Right, a lot of our fully remote kids didn't ask for a laptop because they had a device at home and they weren't traveling back and forth. So there may be some kids who are fully remote who don't, have a district issued device but really haven't asked for one yet. That would be a group that we could take care of if they wanted one when the 3,000 come in. Aside from that, we offered any of the hybrid kids that needed a device to come and get one. And like I said, we allowed staff to take the extra ones, and I haven't heard that there's a need.
Okay.
And again, I do believe that there are still devices in the schools if someone needed one. But we're obviously going to be in a lot better shape as soon as this order comes in.
And let's say there was a para or a teacher who does need a device. What's the process again? Who do they go to in order to get that device?
Everything is at the school level at this point. So
School
if,
level,
yeah,
okay.
if there is any issue with needing a device, if they don't have one, it would be through their school library, I believe, is the one that are checking them out.
Okay.
I think Jeff had a question.
Yeah, I was just concerned with all this technology, do we have enough bandwidth and internet connection? Because I know one of the things with the focus groups that we heard was that teachers were getting kicked out of the clear touch screens during classes, and I don't know enough about technology, but I believe that would have to do with internet connection and bandwidth, right? Are we in a process of getting more, or is there something we can do so that happens less and less? Because I can't imagine how frustrating it is to get kicked out of I think it's the clear touch screen mostly that they're getting kicked out of.
Yeah, and again, Bill can talk to that when he comes in,
Okay,
because he
okay.
has actually, all the metrics and the data behind the scenes that talk about like connectivity, how many times things are being dropped if they are. Again, there are like just some like, more like user issues with sometimes why things get dropped and they don't. Everyone is trying their hardest, but
Right,
some of the stuff is new to everyone. There are certain things it's easier and requires less bandwidth on a machine if you have like less windows open, but sometimes people will open just too many and it will affect things. So we're working with teachers on that front. To be quite honest with you, most of the issues that we're having with drops and things like that are the home connections.
Oh, okay.
We did have a day in the district a week or so ago that there was just an internet issue that had nothing to do with bandwidth. There was an actual just issue in the district. That wasn't the norm. But when Bill comes in, I can actually see if he can produce some reports for us
good,
that
thank
just
you.
talk about, connections. If an individual teacher is having a difficulty reporting something, he can actually get down to that teacher level. He can actually, pull the load for that classroom, for that teacher, see if it did drop, didn't drop. So he has the ability to do that.
Good, thank you.
And he can also just talk, because this is above me too, like with regard to, exactly how much, internet connections we have and things like that. But we actually have our own fiber that runs between buildings. So we're really in very good shape as far as that's concerned.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think it would be good if, if teachers had questions, if they could reach out to Bill.
Well, they do. And I mean, I think the other thing the teachers do is if they're having a connection issue or whatnot,
Right.
we now have the TISs in the building, so like they're a first point of contact.
Okay.
Particularly at the two middle schools this year, we kind of freed up the two TISs to be able to really go into classrooms and support teachers. They're not in the labs delivering a lot of the instruction on their own anymore. We now have the tech assistant that's doing that, so I think that's been helpful. We were also able to add that additional kind of floating TIS to support the two middle schools and the high school, so we have another body there. Certainly, I mean, if you take a look at a school system, I'm not just saying Chelmsford, but any school system compared to, say, like a private company, and the number of, users that are supporting, we have a fraction of the number of people you would see in like another company. Our guys are killing themselves. They're really doing, the best that they can with the numbers that they have. And all in all, I think the product is very good. There's always room to improve, but I think, we're certainly going in the right direction.
So one thing I would like to give some thought to as we're moving forward, is, what is our technology plan for our staff? So all of these things I think are fantastic. I'm very, very pleased to see, some of the things that we are making available to staff in terms of additional resources. But, I want to make sure that we're taking care of the basics, like making sure that they've got a viable, laptop that they can use that will interface with all of these things that we're providing for them. And it may be more than a Chromebook, I don't know. And so what is going to be our plan, as we go forward to make sure that we're giving our staff the technology that they need in order to be able to, efficiently, instruct other kids remotely or in the classroom, And then, in addition to just the hardware pieces of it, what type of professional development? I know we've done a ton already. I think people have been pleased with it, but, obviously it's going to be ongoing because as we get new types of technology into the schools,
Right.
it's really hard sometimes to try and learn while you're trying to take care of everything else that you have to take care of. So, what is our plan for making sure that we're supporting them and getting the information and instruction that they need, and that we're getting, good technology in their hands for instruction?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, these are unusual times, right?
Right,
So
right.
like everyone is just kind of thrown into, delivering instruction now using all technology in like the COVID world. So normally if you do a deploy, you do a new initiative in the district, you would have all of these things, kind of set up.
Right.
Your supports, your professional development and whatnot. We're kind of doing it as we fly
Right.
at this point. But no, I mean, going forward, yes, obviously, we have selected Chrome as the kind of the device that we'll use in the district. So I wouldn't say we're going to vary away from, say, Chromebooks, even for staff, because again, that's just the way we're going.
Right.
But, we have been, and again, Bill can speak to this, I think he's done a very good job of when we've done, say, the one-on-one even, the teachers are getting the new Chromebooks at the same time, teacher level, at the same time the students are getting theirs. So our plan, really, up until this year, was basically a 25% refresh plan. So every year, we were budgeting and trying to replenish 25% of our district staff. We got thrown off because we got thrown into, again, COVID. But we were actually on track for every year to be replacing 25% of student and staff computers, grades 5 to 12. We were 2 years in. So, I mean, ideally, if we'd started 2 years earlier, everyone would have been on the 4-year cycle. So all kids would have, and staff would have every 4 years received a new device. At the end of the 4 years, they would have turned it in and gotten a new device. We're just caught off cycle from that, and we're actually now, kind of almost pre-buying for next year. And obviously, if we get the new technology in and it's set up, we're not going to withhold it from staff. We're going to give it to them and start their, kind of training ahead of time to support them for the outlier years. But I mean, there is PD planning that takes place with, our regular curriculum planning. There are days and sessions that are dedicated to that, and we can hear from staff what they would like some additional training on.
Oh, good.
And the TIS people, again, can actually go into a classroom now where they're not tied to their own room and do a co-teach a lesson, support them with using a new piece of technology. So when things really do get back to a little bit more normal, you're really going to see stuff going well. Linda, I don't know if you want to talk
Yeah, I
to
did. So
specific
what
PD.
happens is weekly, the TIS put out their newsletter about, upcoming things, anything new, like if there's a new extension. And then what they do is they offer virtual sessions, right, for anybody to attend. They'll break it up into like core academic teacher specialist specific, because they might need something beyond going into the classroom and being able to team teach, troubleshoot, things that are happening that way. What happens at the department level is if there's something specific, just say to a certain department, science, English, even within the specialist, then either the department coordinator will provide the PD for the teachers if they're skilled in it, or they'll partner with TIS to be able to deliver what those teachers would need to do their specific curriculum. So this is like a constant ongoing, every like clockwork on Sunday night, just because I'm on every distribution list, their newsletter goes out. And I see it multiple times from all the schools. This is when I'm available, this is when I'm running these PD sessions, this is when I can come into your classroom. So there's a really good system, and it's a good delivery system, because it allows people to either pop in if they need to pop in, one-on-one if they need one-on-one, grade level, or so on and so forth. So there's a good, strong plan that somebody's always there for support.
I think, and I appreciate that, and I think this is what we need to continue to be able to do. But I think that one of the things that I think that this is all highlighted for us is, in the past, teachers have really been great about making do. A little duct tape, a little Gorilla Glue, we're good to go. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they've just been really great about that. And, And I think that, we've talked about this, with our representatives and whatnot, aging buildings. We've done the best to maintain, what we have, but, the fact of the matter is that, more money has to be put into education, right? And I think that, if anything, what this is highlighted in is that this make-to kind of attitude, or, this kind of, cobbling together ways of fixing buildings or technology or whatever it might be, it just has to stop. And so, I just want to make sure that, that what we're doing is, that we're coming up with a plan, because I don't think this is going to be the last time this is going to be an issue that, something like this that we're going to face, and I think that we need to be prepared, and I want to make sure that we're ready for that, whatever it is.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I think, like say the building front, like we've talked about that, like capital planning, I think we'll talk about later on tonight. We are taking steps. We could put twice as much money, 3 times as much money into our capital every year. There are just limits to what,
Right.
we can finance and afford. I think when it comes to the tech piece, we are putting in some of the best technology you're gonna see in a district anywhere in this area. I mean, not even just the devices. I mean, you don't see every classroom in a district outfitted with a ClearTouch TV. The students having their own devices, whether it's a Chromebook or an iPad or whatnot, you're not seeing that. I mean, so one of my concerns, to be honest with you, long-term, is we had no other recourse. We had to do this right now because
Right.
of the circumstance, but it's gonna be the sustainability
Right.
of some of these purchases because we're doing them off-cycle.
Right, we had a great
So-
plan.
No,
And it
we
got
did
blown
have a
up.
good plan,
Yeah,
and I think
right,
we're still
yeah.
gonna preserve that because we're not gonna be tipping into the school choice money. We're gonna stay on cycle with that, but we're really making a huge investment right now. We have to be thinking 5 years, 6 years down the line, when all this new technology is now coming up for
Obsolete.
Right,
replacement.
right.
Are we gonna be in a situation where we can replace it? We're gonna have to probably accelerate our replacement, because as a teacher, that's what I would find frustrating. That if I had this new technology for 3 or 4 years, and it's great and it's working well, and then all of a sudden it's outdated and it's a little clunky and it's not, doing what I want it to do, and there's this new piece over here, how long is it gonna take me to get that new piece?
Right.
And if we're basically doing a purchase where, honestly, this would have taken us 3 or 4 years to do, and we're doing it all in 1 year, I'm more concerned of, again, 4 or 5 years down the line, the replenishment of this technology. We're just really going to have to stay up on top of that when it comes to budgeting.
First of all, I can't say enough positive things about Bill Silver. I think he's done a tremendous job. I mean, just tremendous, in terms of his planning, his foresight, his acquisition of, not only materials, but
Right.
I mean, it's incredible. You're absolutely right. I mean, I don't think that, as I said, that there's enough positive things to be said about the job that he's done. But, I think, and we've all experienced this. I'm not just saying, it's just like I said, teachers, but this mentality of make do, okay? We have to get beyond that somehow. You know what I'm saying? So that, when we get through this, and as we go into whatever the future holds for us, that, that we're well prepared for it.
Right.
It's the make-do attitude in education just has to go away. It just does. And I think you know what I'm talking about. I'm certainly sure you know what I'm talking about. And it's just part of the culture of education. And I think it's, we have to really focus on changing that.
I think it's part of what you're saying is part of making sure that we bring ourselves to that and we see ourselves at that higher level. We've got the equipment, we've got the mind power. I think we've got incredible staff that brings their 100+% to the table. I think we've got the administration, this goes into the goals too, and into the future, but we have all of that, but our mentality has to move forward with all of that. And we need to plan accordingly. So in this year of COVID has hopefully not put us back in any way. When we're talking about technology, it's actually moved us forward into a whole new sphere of education, methods of education. But I think what we need to make absolutely sure is that it's not only, it's the way we're teaching, using this technology and these methods, but that we still keep up the standards that we had before on how we deal with our staff and how we deal with our students and so on. Everything needs to mash, and it's just this year, there's so much being put aside to just get through the technology and getting the stuff out to the student and back to the teacher and so on, that there's going to be so much work for us to do to make sure that that all comes together, including the budgeting and keeping things going into the future. But it also requires a different standard. What are going to be the standards that we require of teachers in the future in our district in terms of the use of technology in a classroom when COVID isn't around?
I think we're getting away from where, what we're
So-
dealing with right now, but, I mean, that's something that we're gonna handle, I hopefully we handle as we go forward, and hopefully at some point get back to strategic planning and all that stuff, so, looking ahead to the future, so.
I think the two big takeaways, really, to be honest with you, though, are first of all, congratulations to Bill Silver. He's done a tremendous job. And also
But I think Bill will be, I agree with you, but I think Bill will be the first one to say, it's not him, his department has worked
And his department.
incredibly hard to roll all this out.
And also thank you to the town.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no, they've been very,
He
Very
can say it's
supportive.
about the department, but he's leading the department, and it's at a time when it's hard to find personnel and people who are able to fill those positions.
agree.
All right, moving on to communication of COVID cases.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch base on this, and we did touch on it in last week's weekly newsletter. So, again, in an effort to be really transparent about our data and whatnot, we have been including the state level, kind of that color-coded map that comes out. Now it comes out Thursdays. It used to be Wednesday. I don't know why they changed their mind, and now they're doing it on Thursday. But that's an actual click on each of our weekly newsletters, so people kind of get state-wide and like Chelmsford-wide data about what's happening, and that's kind of that red color coding we've been talking about. Then DESE has been reporting, and we have that as also a link off the site, how many just COVID cases have been reported that affect learning by district. So what we did this last week, and we're going to update it, and we've received some good feedback on, is an actual Chelmsford Public Schools kind of listing by school the COVID cases. So we have that as part of our communication. And we're doing this as an effort to really, again, kind of show what's happening townwide. We want to be in line with what's happening DESE-wide, and then also at our own individual schools to try to allay fears that, people do hear. Donna had mentioned earlier, across the state, COVID numbers rising. Well, how is that impacting me? We are really not seeing the spread, and we'll talk about this at the second part, of COVID, within our schools. I think the protocols we have in place, the staff are taking very seriously, the students are taking seriously, the masks, the distancing, the washing of the hands. When we have had COVID cases in the schools, again, we have that very broad close contact identification. And when we've had to quarantine staff and students, we have not seen the quarantine staff and students testing positive, so I'll present some numbers to you in a few minutes about that. But I think the actions that we're taking are really working well. And I just, again, sometimes I think we can get caught on kind of like, the national news media, but even like what's happening statewide. In Chelmsford, again, we have had some higher numbers over the last 3 or 4 weeks that have put us into the red, but I've tried to explain, the school dynamic on that. And even again, I had a very nice conversation with Sue Rosa last week, and we both agreed the Chelmsford numbers are not really impacting the Chelmsford community, and it's really not impacting the Chelmsford schools. There's not a need to do something differently. The cases we had were just significant, but they were really tied lately, and I only say this because it was reported, to the long-term care facility in town. If you have a facility that has 52 residents, test positive, and 17 staff members, I think, that is going to skew the whole town's data. I was happy to see in the last statewide data, now they're kind of designating, so we actually kind of had the asterisk, which I think helps to tell our story. But I have tried to really explain, what the numbers mean. Obviously, if we ever had a situation where we were seeing spread in the schools, we would consider not having in-person schooling. I don't want people to think that that's, not possible or couldn't happen in the future, but we're just not seeing that right now, and that's why even though we're in the red, I'm comfortable continuing with the in-person learning. But I think the dashboard hopefully is going to help. I mean, last week we reported we actually had no active cases involving the schools. the majority of cases we've had in the schools have actually been involving, remote students, people who weren't in the school when they could have even infected anyone. We do track all of that data as well, but that really isn't a concern, and I don't feel should be impacting the in-person learning if we're not seeing that happen within the schools. So for this particular bullet, I just wanted to kind of talk about, the fact that we now have that additional layer that we're going to update each week. It ties to the DESI data, so you'll always see it be reported also statewide if people want to check us, and then obviously the town level data. And we intend to keep publishing that in our weekly notices, so people want to see if they can. Even if it's not Friday and someone wants to go in and try to access the report on the website, they can. It's going to be posted publicly. And again, just to try to do that in the means of transparency.
Is it live now, or is it on the website? 'Cause I'm trying to get on, it's just word away, so,
Yeah, it's on there.
yeah.
Maybe give it a second, see if it pops. Yeah, if you click that.
Yeah, it just was whirring away, so I was seeing if it was live.
I'll see if I can get it.
Yeah.
But it is on the
It's on the
site.
website, yeah.
Any questions on that?
Yeah,
I don't know if, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was
I
gonna-
think the things I've heard the most about are things we may not, I don't know what we can do about it. But for example, we just had Halloween. Quite a few people know that there were certain parties that went on. And they happened in the town. And they know why, because there's social media and it's out there, and postings of the pictures and so on. What, if anything, can we do that would prevent those particular students who may be hybrid from impacting the students who didn't choose to get involved in those types of activities? Probably we can't do anything. But those are the kinds of things that I think are concerning to people. And it's not only to fellow students, but, to the staff that's teaching them, to the other parents who say, yeah, we know you need to go to school and you need to be there in person. So there's, what possibly, are districts doing anything about this? I've seen some situations where the school finds out that there was a particular party, that certain students were involved, and then requires them to quarantine for 14 days. So is there anything like that where we have anything being monitored at all?
Honestly, Maria, I don't know. I mean, and the hard part is, I don't know that we have a lot of control over, like private parties and things like that happen. And for as many as we may see, on social media, there could be others that we don't. And I think what we've tried to stress in every communication we've made is this model is only going to be effective, and it's only going to be able to be in functioning as long as people take this seriously. If we get to the point where they're not, if COVID is getting brought into the school, if we're identifying close contacts and people are now testing positive, we may have to shut down. I mean, I think that's going to ultimately be the end thing that happens. Because again, I'm just concerned that, obviously when we hear about something, we can follow up with that particular group. But how widespread is it that we don't know about? Are there other parties going on that, or gatherings going on?
Right.
I just don't know. What I can tell you is the data that we have now, and we'll get into it in a second, indicates that we are not seeing that come into the schools. So again, whether this is happening and kids happen to be, fully remote, and you're testing positive, but they're not impacting the school, or they had a party, but no one happened to have COVID. I don't know. I think from my perspective, I'm really just pushing the messaging about, and this is a fragile, kind of situation we have going on here, just how important it is to be taking this seriously. And ultimately, they're jeopardizing it for everyone. They're jeopardizing it for the student who's not going to the party, who really wants the in-person schooling and who is thriving in that. They're going to lose out if, we can't, maintain, the safety and the health of staff and students. And if it gets to that point, unfortunately, people can be angry, but we're going to have to pull the plug, and we're not going to have in-person learning. Other than that, I honestly don't know what to say. It's disappointing for the amount of time and effort and, the messaging that has been clear and consistent from the beginning from, I think, myself. You see the building administrators, messaging this consistently to the kids. It's disappointing to see that happens. Ultimately, they could be impacting our ability to continue in-person learning, and everyone's going to lose out. I don't know how else other to put it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Right, anything else? Segueing in,
Yeah,
identification.
so
of
this
contact.
I actually do think is, again, it just, kind of telling. I did just print out for you in case you wanted to read it instead of having to look at the screen. But I wanted to just walk you through the data that we have so far on the active cases we've had in the schools. And just, again, kind of help you understand the data we have, the data that is being tracked. Again, Peggy Kump, our coordinator for school nursing services, does a great job. She's in constant contact with the Board of Health and Sue Rosa, who's, again, I don't know how they're even keeping up with the stuff that they are, but they are doing a good job as well. But I just want to give you, because again, I look at this data and it makes me comforted in what's going on, but I just wanted to be able to share it with you. And I'm going to touch upon it, I think, in this coming week's newsletter, just to let the public also know about this. But in the cases we've had, again, that have impacted schools, so these have been cases that individuals, because again, as you read this, it's going to feel like I'm talking in code a little bit, but I can't really say student or staff member because of HIPAA confidentiality. So we just call them individuals. But in the cases where an individual tested positive, we again have, our rule is a close contact is anyone basically in that classroom with the student. So as much as DESE or even Department of Public Health guidelines at this point say anyone who was, within the 6 feet of the student and not wearing a mask would be a close contact. There was some change even recently about is it over 15 minutes within a 24-hour period. Like, I'm not even at the point where I could try to figure out how we would implement something like that. So just based on our very broad definition of a close contact, the first case that we had at the high school, we had, one individual involved on 9/24. I just had to use the dates to kind of identify the cases. Of all the close contacts that were identified of that particular student, all tested negative. So, there were 8 teachers, 3 paras, and 44 students who were impacted by that singular case. But all of those individuals tested negative. So they're quarantined, they're out of school for the 14 days. They're encouraged after day 4 or 5 to go get a COVID test. These individuals did get a test, and that data got reported back to Peggy, who collects it for us. And we know that no one associated with that case was positive. Now, if anyone was positive, we would get the result from the Board of Health. So I'm not concerned about that. The only thing that could slip through the cracks here is you technically don't have to go get the test. So I wouldn't have like a negative on that one. Or I guess technically a positive if it did come back. But of the staff and students who went to get tested, no one came back positive. So again, I really do think that speaks to the distancing, the masks, and how seriously that's taken place. But there were a significant number of people that were impacted, as you know, by
Yes,
that
I do.
particular case. Then we had a second case at the high school on 9/26. Again, anyone identified as a close contact of that particular case, and it impacted 8 additional teachers and 64 students at the high school, all tested negative. All right, so we had one positive case that basically triggered quarantining of the 8 teachers and 64 students, but all test results came back negative. Third one and fourth one weren't quite as impactful to the numbers, but they still impacted the in-person learning at the high school. On 10/2, we had an individual, again, all close contacts came back negative, but that impacted 2 teachers of para and 7 kids. And then 10/13, this one I got to explain to you. So the first, it started out as a single case. And of that particular single case, all close contacts came back negative, and that impacted 2 teachers and 17 students. But over that particular weekend, what we're going to call Activity A is a group that was involved with a non-Chelmsford Public Schools activity. They just all happened to be related to the high school, but they were participating in outside activity. An individual within that group A was positive. So of the Chelmsford High portion of that particular group, there were 11 members of the group. When the 11 members went and got tested, again, this is all happening outside of Chelmsford High School, 6 came back positive, which actually is significant, which meant that there was certainly spread within that particular non-CPS group. 5 members did test negative. How that impacted us is in number 5. So one of the 6 cases of Group A also happened to be a member of what we're going to call Activity B, which was a group at the high school. So that resulted in all of Group B needing to be quarantined. What was interesting is one individual, again, that happened outside of the high school, but one individual identified as a close contact in Group B, so one of the Group B people, did test positive for COVID. That was the only positive case of a close contact. The other 28 individuals who were part of Group B tested negative. So that didn't make sense. So, and even like the Board of Health couldn't particularly track, did that one case that was positive really come from contact with Group A particular individual, or was there maybe a contact with, someone else in their family? So that was the only outlier in the whole group. Of the 6 cases that were reported in Group A that were positive, one of the cases did impact because the individual had been in school, a particular classroom. However, of that particular classroom that the individual had been in prior to that weekend, no one tested positive. So all 3 teachers and 11 kids in that particular group tested negative. So again, this just tells me that we're not seeing the spread within the school. When you take the high school as a lump, because again, that's the biggest group we've had 159 individuals, and these were students, so 159 individuals be identified as close contacts of all these 6 cases. Out of the 159, 158 have tested negative. There's that one outlier on the separate Group B that did come back positive, but the origin was unknown of whether it was really the contact with B or not. So that is the only positive case we've had. We really can't attribute it to this because the 28 other individuals, it was odd that no one would have contracted it. Of this, of our staff, and again, I'm going to message this specifically to the staff, we've had 26 staff members who've been identified as close contacts within our system. All 26. All 26 have come back negative when they've gone for their tests. So no one has tested positive. Again, because of our distancing, because of the masks, and because of the protocols we have in place. So I think that's telling. That's, kind of high school specific. As a parent, I would also want to know this. Because again, if you're seeing the communications about, spread and numbers going up, I think this is very reassuring that, we're not, again, seeing the spread at the high school, and we're taking this very seriously. A couple of our other schools have had one-off cases. Consistent theme. So at the Harrington, there's been 1 case since the beginning of the school year on 9/24. 1 individual tested positive. Of the close contacts, which is the whole classroom, 1 teacher and 9 students tested negative. We had no positive contacts from that. South Row also had 1 case earlier in the year on September 17th. Ironically, they were our first case. The individual tested positive. 1 teacher and 7 students from that particular classroom all went out and got tested, all negative. So we had no spread in any of the elementary school cases whatsoever. And then we did just recently at Parker have 1 individual be infected. However, they had no close contacts within the school with staff or students, so there was no one to identify to be tested. And then McCarthy, Byam, Center, and Chips have had no confirmed cases. So again, I present this just tonight more as, just information for you. I'm going to be compiling this into kind of a message for our staff to, again, just kind of reiterate what we're doing. But in our weekly communication to parents, too, that we kind of now have the dashboard. I'm hoping that they just find this, again, trying to be transparent and explain, what's happening in our schools, that we're not seeing this, COVID spread. Even in the cases that are positive, We're quarantining staff and students. We're not seeing the follow-up tests come back positive. And it really does just speak to what we're doing as being effective in managing in-person schooling in this climate.
Any questions on any of this?
I might have missed this part, my apologies. But when it says, no cases affected school, can you explain what that means?
Which one do you want?
Just any, well, it says McCarthy Byam Center and CHIPS, because we know that there were cases, right, at McCarthy, but it didn't affect the school. So was it, like remote students? Is it,
Yeah,
people that maybe tested positive but weren't in the school,
So you've got two situations going on, and you hit both of them. So we're tracking, the state is tracking, any individuals who test positive who have been in the school environment who potentially could have infected others.
Okay.
So if you're a remote student, and, for argument's sake, you're at Center said none, but you're at Center School and you're a remote student, if you tested positive because, and this is what we're starting to see, like a parent, a parent might test positive, the child is then considered a close contact. 4 or 5 days after being identified as a close contact, they go for a test and they're positive. Obviously, as bad as it is for the particular child and the family, they've never been at the school because they're a remote student, so that doesn't impact schooling. If the child is well enough, they can continue to participate in, because a lot of them are asymptomatic, they can continue to participate in schooling. If they're sick, then they certainly don't, but they didn't have any impact on the school, so that's what it's meant by that. Another one could be similarly a staff member. If we ever had a staff member that either was remote or happened to be working for remote during any period of time when they would have been contagious or could have infected a classroom, and they weren't there, then they wouldn't be included in these numbers. So I think that, that is important, but these are students or staff who did test positive and they were physically on site where they could have impacted others.
Right, so I just want to make sure that we're clear on that, because I think there's been some confusion among families around when they are hearing that someone is tested positive, but then they don't necessarily get word, from the principal or administration of the school that, that there was a positive case in the school. That I think that there's confusion about why that may be.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we have to be clear about when we're talking about this contact tracing, we're talking about the possibility that it could have spread into the school because that person was in the school building in some form or fashion.
Yeah, they had to physically be on site
Okay.
to be able to impact anyone. So if they weren't, either because they're remote or, the whole period when they could have been infectious, they weren't physically at the school, they wouldn't be considered, you wouldn't have close contacts and you may not have notification.
Okay. And then do we have a consistent method of notifying parents about positive cases district-wide? Like, is that consistent from school to school? Okay.
Yeah, again, we haven't really had to do it much at the other schools other than the high school. I think the high school has been on top of this, and they've been sending out regular communications. The 2 other times at the other schools where this has happened, they're using the same letters that Peggy puts together for them. It just hasn't happened much because we've only had 2 other cases. But they have followed the same. So like at the South Row case, there's a letter that goes out to the whole school saying, because there was a person in property, that an individual in our community has tested positive. You'll receive a second notice if you are impacted or you need to quarantine, because we do want to tell everyone what's going on. But then you don't need to be concerned unless you get the second message. And on that second message, it was directed particularly to the classroom that was impacted, the staff and students that might have been in there. They were told they needed to be quarantined. And I'll tell you, in those 2 particular cases too, Peggy personally called the families to kind of talk through, what quarantine means, when you should go for your test, to confirm the dates of when you can return to school. They're making a personal outreach, and that is all being confirmed. So, again, I do know Peggy did those personally, but our other school nurses could also be helping to make those family contacts.
I know that the high school has had more cases, but I do want to say that the feedback around the communication from Principal Murray has been outstanding.
That came out
Yes.
at the
Really
council schools
positive.
meeting, like unsolicited, people
Yeah.
just started raving about
Yeah,
the
absolutely,
fact that,
100%.
Yeah.
they've done a really good job at contacting parents when something like that
Yes.
happened. So.
And Hannah Barker sent a comment about that specifically to make sure that we stated that the communication at the high school has been really commendable. And, it should be used as an example of how to communicate on these issues because it's been pretty open. I do have a question, and that is this. If a student is remote, is a student permitted to also participate in activities at the school outside of school time? Sports, other activities?
Yeah, I mean, there'd be nothing prohibiting them from doing that.
Uh-huh.
What would the scenario be? Like, do you mean like a club?
Okay. Now, do we track that just as much as we track class attendance? My concern is, and some other people have mentioned it as well to me, that if a student is remote, participates in an activity, tests positive, they don't necessarily need to report it because they don't come to the school every day
It is
and attend
reported.
class?
And
Okay,
so-
and is that a clear policy?
It is, and I can tell you, like in the example of the high school,
Mm-hmm.
and not to obviously identify here, but Activity B
Okay,
is a high school group that you could have a remote person in.
Mm-hmm.
All of Activity B had to quarantine.
okay,
So whether you were a hybrid kid or you were a remote kid, if you were in B, then you had to quarantine.
so if you participate in an activity,
Right, so anyone on that roster, whether you're hybrid or remote, is all tracked. That whole group has to quarantine.
okay,
Obviously, if you're remote, it's not as impactful to you because
Uh-huh.
you're remote anyway. But yes, that does have to happen.
that's great that you're making it clear. The other thing I wanted to say is that I'm glad you're doing this because I think this is very transparent and I think that that's very important to do. I would ask you to also continue to stress as much as you can that really the reason this is working is because we're following all of these guidelines, and to continue to do that, because there is also sometimes a feeling of, oh, we're doing so well and,
Right.
just
Can't let
getting
your guard down,
laxy-daisy
yeah.
about things, and we just
Yeah.
cannot do that.
I agree.
Anything else on contact tracing? All right, next.
We kind of touched on it a little bit,
Yeah.
just, I do take this very seriously, and I want, the audience to know and staff and students to know, I feel comfortable having us continue with the hybrid learning right now because of the data, because we know where the COVID transmission in the town is coming from. We're in regular communication with the Board of Health again, our own nurses and whatnot, and the cases clearly by the data are not impacting the schools. If it ever becomes a point in time where it is, where we're starting to now see spread, when we have an individual test positive and close contacts are coming back positive, we will need to consider moving to full remote instruction. There's just no two ways around it. But for the time being, I do not see that being the case. I think the data at the state level would support that, even, with the Chelmsford asterisk on their mapping. I think in our own district data, in breaking it down by school, we're not seeing that as an issue. The one thing I do want to mention, because I know this is a question that's come up a couple times to me, is, if we ever had to move remote, does that mean it has to be the whole district? There could be a situation where a particular school is spreading, and we may have to have that school go fully remote. You've seen that in other communities happen where a high school might have to go remote, but really K-8 is not impacted, and they don't. That is a possible. It does not have to be an all or nothing type situation. So everything is kind of in play. I watch this very seriously, and I just want to stress to you that I take this very seriously. I would not keep us in school if I for a second thought that there were any issues. We're going to keep this data going. We're going to continue to report it and figure out ways to be very out there with this data and transparent in our communications, posting to the website, continuing to build out on that, kind of the Chelmsford COVID dashboard. But I just wanted to reiterate that I'm comfortable continuing with what we're doing because the data supports that.
And how often are you in contact with Sue Rosa?
Weekly, but Peggy talks to her daily. So we have contact with the Board of Health, on a daily basis. Peggy would call me, and unfortunately she calls too much sometimes with different things, but no, she's wonderful, and like I said, I actually had a very nice conversation with Peggy last week, not Peggy, Sue, just to talk about Chelmsford, and where our numbers, and we did actually see a little bit of a decline in the overall, And I think what you're going to start to see is, because they're doing a 14-day window, a significant number of those positive tests from the long-term care facility are now coming up on the 14-day mark. So I would not be surprised if we go down again. I think we're going to be teetering on red, yellow just for a little bit because of how high the numbers were. But I would not be surprised if we start getting closer to yellow again.
So one of the things I was wondering if you could touch on too is, unfortunately, there's a lot of information that's coming out, and sometimes it appears to be contradictory. So for example, we had the Department of Education, starting back in June, who's 6 times changed their minds about how it is that we're going to do things.
Right.
But one of the things that they said, just prior, I think, to us coming back to school is that if a school district was in the red, for example, I think it was 3 weeks, then everybody was going to go remote. And then they changed that somewhere in between, I think, September and now, where it was more a matter of looking at, where were the cases happening and then evaluating.
Right.
So, but, go ahead.
On that, I mean, it's been incredibly frustrating with the data that's been coming from DESE and DPH, and, it hasn't been as coordinated as I think as many school districts would like it to have been. Originally, I do try to take a step back and realize that, you've got the governor's office doing something. You've got the Department of Ed, trying to kind of follow along. Ed and public health don't really always work together, so that's a whole different dynamic as well.
And the CDC.
That's over here.
I know, but I'm just
Yeah, no,
saying, it's all out there,
They're all
right?
over here, right?
Yeah.
And they all have their own
Right.
things. I think at least what we have seen is DESE and DPH, their guidelines have now at least started to merge. So you're seeing much more consistency with regard to that. But no, it was a little haphazard, I think, the summer. When the first map came out, I think there was a concern that if you went in the red, 1 week, obviously you then had to go out. And DESE did come out and say, listen, we don't want you to go in the red after just 1 week because weird things can happen. Again, you can just have a couple of cases, depending on your community size, that can throw you. Like for us, the difference between 3 or 4 cases in a day can throw us from one color to another. So that's significant. What DESE came out and said is we at least want you to be looking at 3 weeks of data. So take a look at 3 weeks of data, make a decision based on that. So that's kind of how we started the school year. We've been doing that, but I think what's happened is a lot of communities have then gone 3 weeks and they're in the red, but the data in their community is not indicating that there's any spread concern within schools.
Right, which is
So-
why we have the asterisk now.
Now we have an asterisk.
Right.
So I don't know what's going to be next. I don't know, like, if now have a bold and an asterisk if something else changes. But what they're just urging you to do is not to make a knee-jerk reaction because you happen to be in a particular color or, it's been a couple of weeks, to really kind of get into the data. And what is it saying about spread within your community? Because again, if we had just even community spread and it was going to impact the schools, that could impact our decision. If it was within the schools, that could impact our decision. But if it's within a nursing home or if it's within a prison, I know Barica is going to be running into this soon. If it's at the Tewksbury State Hospital,
Middleton's been in the red for how long?
Colleges, North
would
Andover.
that necessarily mean you should shut down schools in your community? And particularly if it's going well. And, that is what our students and parents, I think, want as well, is to stay in person as long as we can. And I think we're doing a very good job at it. But there has been changing messaging, and I know that's confusing to people.
I found it confusing.
Well, then on top of it, they throw in there, the governor and does he come out and say, well, you should still stay in school, we don't want you to go to remote,
Right.
Well, the comments by the governor were that in order to keep kids in school, I need to get these restrictions on the way again. But question, and that whole thing with Littleton, where I had read as well that, they were going to close down for an entire month or whatever, go remote.
Littleton?
Yeah, I had read that they had made a decision to go remote for an entire month, but they're being audited, I understand, by DESE. So what does an audit lead to? I mean,
A lot of work for us.
A lot of work.
a lot of work. Okay, true.
And again, I mean, here's what's happening. So you don't have every community doing the same thing. And again, this even came up in one of our calls with DESE. There is some frustration in school districts that originally DESE was telling us there was going to be a statewide plan. that, everything was going to be implemented across districts. Then all of a sudden that changed. And I think, again, that didn't help the messaging over the course of the summer. Now individual communities were going to have to select their models. They were going to have to put 3 plans together. It just made it very not consistent or inconsistent among communities. There were a couple of communities that I think floated the idea of, well, say Thanksgiving is coming. If people are going to go, with family and travel and whatnot, should we basically quarantine to protect everyone else in the buildings? The counter argument to that is a lot of the people are indicating, let's do that basically so that we can travel and not have to worry about, impacting others, when honestly, you're not supposed to be traveling. So if you shut schools down, you close it for a week, are you just encouraging people to basically go and take a vacation or to go and travel? And even when they come back, because you're not going to have everyone come back the exact same day, what does that then do to your opening? So I think you're not seeing that. I think, again, DESI sometimes has some very good things that they do. I think sometimes also they're kind of late to the game in some of this stuff as well. And their thing was, if you're going to preemptively do this, and the data doesn't support this. So this was really kind of a rub in districts that are like green or have no issues. If you're just preventively doing that, then they said, you're going to look at an audit. And what an audit does is basically it's around your learning model. So, we're now going to come in and really take a look at, is what you're doing appropriate? Is your instruction asynchronous? Is it synchronous? Do you have enough time on learning? To basically try to convince them not to do it without looking at the data. I think if the data ever supported it, that's one thing. But if you're a green community and you've been having in-person learning going on, to all of a sudden just say you're going to go, fully remote from Thanksgiving to Christmas, is really just going to encourage people to go away, and then you're going to be dealing with this in January.
But the problem is that on the surface, sometimes this all seems somewhat, as I said, contradictory, if not hypocritical, because you're only going to allow so many people in a restaurant, but we're going to fill up the schools with, a couple hundred kids.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem to make sense to people. And, I think that this is what I think people need clarified, all right? Because, I think it is, I don't even have a good explanation for it, really, to be perfectly honest with you. If we're putting all of these other restrictions on businesses and whatnot in the community, why are schools exempt? Or why does COVID only come out after 9:30 at night? I don't know, because, this is the latest thing that we're hearing from the governor. In addition to that, by the way, there's going to be a new way of reporting daily data, so I'm sure that that's going to throw, something in. I think that came out today. So that will add some more interesting information to the mix. But, it does get frustrating. And I think the other thing, too, is sometimes going remote is not necessarily direct. It is related to the virus, but not necessarily an outbreak. Like, at what point, if we have so many families going remote because they want to keep their kids at school because they're concerned about, not the infection rates in the schools, but the potential for it, when do we go remote? As a district, like is there a tipping point when there's so many people that are now remote that it isn't viable to remain in session?
I think it depends. I mean, the staffing that's involved and like the whole model, are you properly servicing it? I'll tell you that we're not seeing that at really the elementary and the middle school level.
Right.
And by and large, we're not seeing that at the high school. I mentioned to you, we had the issue where we had the first couple of cases at the high school. In particular, the student athletes got concerned that they were going to get tagged as a close contact. Clearly, the data indicates that they're not testing positive, but they're still sidelined from their sports for 2 weeks. And sports were fragile. Like, we didn't know how much sports we were going to be able to actually run this fall. So, again, the kids are always one step ahead of us thinking-wise, but in their mind, they're probably thinking, my season could only be 4 weeks. If I get quarantined and I'm out for 2 weeks, I'm missing half my season. We're going to have to revisit, and we'll talk about that in a second, the transitions from one model to another. But, certainly it's a factor. We're not seeing that at the elementary and the middle school level, though, where, people are making that shift. I have a little, now this is off topic, I have a little concern just about, and again, this is just messaging I'm going to have to put out there. People who have picked the hybrid model, but, now as the weather gets bad. So if you happen to wake up on your model, cohort A, and you're supposed to be in school Monday, Tuesday, and you get up on Tuesday morning, it's kind of cold and windy out, do you not want to go to school and just stay home for the day? We really can't have that. I mean, the teachers get upset by that. I understand that. You've planned a whole day for the kids, and now, it's cold. I would have liked to have stayed home too, but, I was in the model, and, I was coming to school. No, but it's just the practical piece of this whole thing. So the messaging is going to be, if this is the model you've selected, you need to do that. Because let's say, again, we did have some of those shifts, and we had more people that wanted to go remote. Well, is it enough then to tip the scale so you actually have another remote class? But you're going to have to lock into that for X amount of time because we can't be going back and forth. So we will get to that in the next item, but it is something on our radar, Donna.
All right, anything else on this? Okay. Learning model transitions.
All right, speaking of which, just to give you
It's in transition.
just to give you a quick update on this one. The schools last week, in either their newsletters or over the weekend, did communicate to families that this is the time of year that we're going to consider doing switches if you wanted to. We had originally, when people signed on in August, asked them to commit to the first marking period, which, depending if you're elementary, middle, or high school, is sometime in November on different dates. What we think we're going to see is, for the most part, at the elementary and the middle school, where people have, a particular teacher that's like their teacher, if they happen to have been fully remote and they want to now try hybrid, we're going to try to basically allow that, if there's room in the room, allow that child to come in, stay with that teacher, and they're already part of the classroom. So there's not going to be a significant uptime or adjustment. It's just going to be that the instruction is in person. They already know the students and they already know the teacher. What we're trying to do is now just see how many of those requests we can accommodate. So each individual school on their own sent a communication to the parents asking, do you want to make a switch? And we're looking to, after Thanksgiving, make that switch. Just because there is a little bit of, it could be a transportation piece. So like Joanna and Peter need to be prepared for that. We didn't want to just have it be haphazard and having one school do it one day, one do it another day. So they're collecting all the data now. They're going to go through over this week and next week and figure out how many students they can fit into the classrooms because space is a concern. And then do parent notifications. It's all within their buildings. And then likely make those changes for right after Thanksgiving. At the high school, as you know, that'll also kind of align with winter sports. I don't know what's going to happen with winter sports, but that always starts the Monday after Thanksgiving. So at least those will align to. No, I don't know what's going to happen.
I don't either.
Yeah.
Not very helpful.
But normally, that's when, again, if we had some of the athletes who are concerned, we're going to kind of lock in at that point. So by our next school committee meeting, I can report for you, how many actually wanted to go back and forth. Donna, we can take a peek then to see, where our numbers stand. But for the most part, I really do think you're going to see more people wanting to go from remote to hybrid, because now it's actually, they've kind of seen it working. They've seen the class, they want to give it a try. So we'll see.
Question on that. The sports decision for the winter, is that coming during the time when people can make this decision? Because I know that at the high school, this has actually had an impact in some of the classes. I mean, you're talking about some classes where you went from maybe having 7 or 8 students in a class in a cohort, and then suddenly you have 1 or 2. So that is a substantially different number in a classroom for discussion and for many other things. So if they know what they're going to be doing in the winter sports, and if they want to stay fully remote in order to be part of the winter sports, would they be able to make this decision timely? Are we giving it enough time to make sure that those people have that ability to make that decision?
Yeah, this is the time to be doing it. So, over these next 2 weeks is really when we're going to figure out what's happening. I just don't know what's going to happen with sports. So you've got multiple boards who are kind of looking at, should we even have sports? If we're going to have sports, which should be offered, which can be done safely, which can't. The winter is going to pose a significant problem for us just because of the nature of everything being indoors. Pools are basically out. I don't see how, swimming is going to happen. Your basketball, it's all, in gyms, wrestling, I don't see how you do that.
Even hockey's been shut down
Yeah,
at the youth league just because, MIA is supposed to come out with something. They already said no tournaments. and they're supposed to come out with, more sports-specific stuff within the next couple weeks, so.
Almost like this fall, I don't know how you felt, but I almost felt it was more like, not round robin-y, but like you were just like basically putting together matches or games, just with your MVC teams. It wasn't
That's all it
like
was.
rankings and standings. It was an opportunity to let kids at least play their sport, get out, and have some competition. There was a lot of like inter-squad play and whatnot, but
Sorry, this is Bob.
we didn't see a lot of like the competitiveness was there within the games, but it wasn't like you were watching who was first in the NBC
There's
Big
no
School.
end game, there's no tournament at
No
the end,
tournament.
that's the thing, So if you had a good season, great. If you have a bad season, great. It was just, to get,
It was like
people out
playing
there.
camaraderie.
yeah, for the most part.
But I don't know what sports is gonna be, but like this is the time to do it,
Yeah.
because that would all be starting after Thanksgiving.
Okay,
So, and then when we get the numbers, we can make some decisions.
great.
Sort of on a similar note, what happens if, 2 weeks from now, Governor Baker says, everybody's shutting down? Are we prepared for the total remote switchover?
Yeah, I mean, like last spring, if he ever did do that,
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're as prepared as we're ever gonna be. I'll tell you, we're in a heck of a lot better position now than we were last spring. Even like, I actually like the Wednesdays, like our remote days. It's been a day every week where the teachers and the kids have been able to at least kind of practice being fully remote. So I don't think it's gonna catch people off guard. But I hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah, me
But
too.
I think, we don't know what's gonna happen as we get deeper into the winter. But no, I'm feeling fairly confident because again, our staff's been doing it.
Yep.
So, and if we were to go fully remote, in terms of the equipment and everything else that the teacher needs, which right now, those touchscreens and so on are all in the classroom,
Yeah, they don't go home.
Yeah.
right?
They don't
I said
go home.
They don't go home.
They're not gonna go
Oh,
home,
they're
and
huge.
you're not gonna allow them to check it and take it home. But, I'm hoping that those 3,000 laptops come in time, and to make sure that our staff has access to that if we were going to go fully remote,
Yeah.
I think would be extremely important to make sure of that.
I don't disagree with you, but like our staff are using the equipment on the Wednesdays when they are remote.
Uh-huh.
So like, I don't see that being a big issue if we're forced into being remote.
Okay, and on the Wednesdays, they're not in the classroom? They can choose to be,
They
correct?
can choose to be. Yeah, a significant number are because all of their materials are there. But we
Right.
do have some that do work from home.
But that's the concern, the tools are there.
Yep.
So, understood.
So it's kind of a wait and see game, but like I said, I think we are in a lot better shape.
So we're shooting for the Monday after Thanksgiving now?
For the bigger transition?
Yeah, for the bigger
Yeah.
transition, okay.
Yeah.
Because I know we had said end of first quarter, but there was so many different dates and all that, so.
The 3 dates we're
Yeah,
moving.
okay.
And then, again, if we're looking to be, like even at the high school, I know it's not gonna line up perfectly, but if you're basically looking to go from fully remote to just join that same class, but you're in person and there's a seat, it's not like you're meeting a whole new group of kids and a new teacher or whatnot. So it seems like that's just the easiest and the best place to do it, because there are some logistics involved, again, with transportation and other things like that.
All right, any other questions on transitions?
In terms of the different models of teaching, I think one of the things that I really got from this working group that, when we listened, was that people are extremely stressed. And I think one of the things that makes people stressed is, are we really teaching? Are our students really learning? Are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? And I think when you're in the ordinary schoolroom with all your kids in front of you, you have ways of assessing that and so on. In this, where we have the transitions and the different types of teaching models, how does a teacher assess and what tools do we give them to assess whether their methods are working to really impart the knowledge and be able to assess whether a student has learned or has not learned the material and so on, in hybrid versus a remote and so on. How do we determine this? How are we determining it? Do we have any sense of, how well we're doing in terms of the performance of students and the imparting of knowledge?
Yeah, I think, well, I'll let Linda speak to this 1 second. We don't have really, like, this is our baseline year, right? So we don't have like 2 or 3 years worth of data to say, if you're fully remote, it's more beneficial than, if you're hybrid or vice versa. We just don't have that yet. But I mean, do you want to talk a little bit just about like the district, already the assessments we have and?
Yeah, we have a variety, we have an assessment calendar, and we're following through with that assessment calendar with the tools we have. So for example, at the elementary level, we've done what's called DIBBLES, which is the dynamic, I won't get into it, but that's how we find out for their reading pieces. The RAN, which is assessing students to make sure that we don't have students that might be being identified for dyslexia. We have our iReady data, plus our internal common assessments, right? So everything's being implemented, and our data is coming back to let us know where our students currently lie. Because I do know, and I actually just had a conversation with a teacher about this afternoon, because I know one of the biggest concerns from last spring was, are our students going to be okay? Like, how far behind are they going to be? And right now, nothing's indicating that they're far behind at all, right? So it's lining up with our current beginning of the year data that we've had historically for upwards of 5 years, right? So that's the good news part of the story. So teachers can start where they normally are. I think what's happened this year is, obviously, we started a little bit later. There's a little bit difference in routines for teachers, like teaching kids what their routines are when they're online opposed to in class, which has taken up a little bit of our beginning of the year teaching that we normally do. But right now, nothing's indicating to us that we're finding that students are super far behind, or that what's currently happening is not working. When we give our second set of benchmarks, because those will be pretty telling, typically they always are, right? Because kids just come back from the summer, we don't have a lot of control of what happens. That will give us even more data to find out, are we still on the mark, to make sure that kids are progressing within the curriculum. So I'm confident that right now we're in good shape.
Okay, and this is elementary or?
Elementary and middle school.
And middle school.
Yep,
All right.
and then high school has common assessments. They don't typically take like an online, type of an assessment. So right now, everything's indicating that we're in good shape.
Okay.
And speaking from experience, teachers are going to worry.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
going to worry.
Yes, they are.
But the
Yes.
kids are also a lot more resourceful than you think, and they're flexible, and whether they're at home or they're in front of you or they're both, they adapt. They really do. They really do. It's amazing, to see every day that and I give them assessments and they're doing well. I mean, so they're learning.
Yeah, they are.
They are learning.
Do we have a sense also of absences or of no people who do not show up for meets and so on? Will we have a sense of that at some point?
Yeah, I mean, that kind of goes into the next element here. When it comes to like student attendance and like student enrollment, we did submit as a district our SIMS data to the state for our October 1 numbers just about a week and a half ago. So we will normally, by the end of November, early December at the latest, I don't know if there's going to be an adjustment this year, we'll receive like our official October 1 number, which is the number that's used for the Chapter 70 foundation formula and next year's budgeting. So that's been submitted and reported. To your second point of your question, the attendance is going to be difficult this year, and it's not only difficult for us, but like all districts, because, if you normally, we're only taking in-person attendance, and let's just say your attendance rate was, 94%, being present that day. Well, now we have the students who are being recorded as virtually present, or even your hybrid students who don't, for whatever reason, go to school that day. Could be legitimate. Maybe they were quarantined, or they were close contact. We don't want them coming to school if that's the case. So they're now logging in from home, but they're virtually present, right? That would have normally been an absence. What I can see happening with us as well as across the state is your attendance rates are going to increase substantially. So we could be reporting closer to a 99% attendance rate because kids are either in person or they're logged in at home. Now they're, how engaged they are, I think that's something that we have to, work with our teachers on. Are there cases where a student would put on computer join the classroom and not, have their
Right.
video on or not be participating. Yes, I'm sure that's happening. There are different little tools in the system that teachers can use to kind of figure out how much time kids are spending on their devices. But I think when we just look at the attendance rates, the data is going to be, in my opinion, the data is going to be skewed this year to indicate much higher attendance than we
Wow.
typically have had, because we've only ever reported in-person attendance. I don't know if you're seeing that.
No, absolutely. I think today was the first time I actually marked somebody absent for about the last week and a half, because the kids that would be absent are checking in at home. So we mark them like as face-to-face remote.
Yeah.
We have a special attendance code, but this is the first day I can remember in like a week and a half that somebody was actually absent from class that didn't check in online. So,
Now, I've heard reports in some districts, I haven't heard that here as much, but I have heard in some districts where they just don't show up for the remote meets. So if we've had families where a child hasn't hasn't come to the remote meet, we've been touching base, I would assume.
Yeah, that hasn't been a widespread problem here. That is an issue in other districts. So I do know that,
It is.
Because when
my
you
wife's,
s-
I was talking to my wife about it, and she's having
we see it more
trouble.
in the urban
Right.
districts.
Uh-huh.
But like, the teacher would be the first point of contact here. If a student was not engaged or wasn't coming, the school counselor would also make contact.
Okay.
Again, depending on the level, it might more happen at the middle of the high school level. We do have school resource officers that can intervene. So we do have layers of supports and interventions that maybe some other districts don't have.
Okay.
But I'm not, Linda, are you hearing that like widespread at all, or?
No, it's not widespread, it's like little pockets here and there, and then we send out, again, it starts with the teacher, works with the school administration, we have supervisor of students, anything like that, that we have to work with those families.
Good. In remote families, I am sure we've made them aware, but just so that they are aware, that counseling and anything else is available
Oh, yeah.
to them. Because I've had a couple of people question whether, and I've said to them, just touch base with,
Yeah, oh, they're engaged too. I mean,
school.
our counselors are servicing remote-only
Okay.
families.
great,
The psychologists are, the school counselors are, they have them as part of the regular groups.
super.
Yeah.
Right,
So-
anything else on?
So in December, we'll probably have the student enrollment report.
Okay.
Just with regards to attendance, well, first let me say this as an aside. This is one of the concerns that many of the urban districts across the state are, having around is the lack of equity in terms of access to certain resources, and then what is going to be the widening gap, right? So I know it's a big concern, certainly not just for the district that I work in, but many districts across the state, But
I would say that we're urban to a certain extent. It's a definition of a district. But in any event, I think there is no question in my mind ever that the reason our students will be engaged is multifold. One is we've got the good staff and the good teachers that are doing it. Two, we have parents who are involved, which is extremely important. Because if you don't have that, especially in these different modes of education that we're doing today, there's no way that the student is going to do well. We're lucky in that. And three, we have students who, for the most part, care and want to be involved.
The other thing too is I just want to make sure that we're balancing, because I think it is important to monitor progress and making sure that kids are, making the necessary academic gains. But we also have the social emotional piece that we have to deal with. And, between just everything, the things that are happening, politically, in society, with the it's a lot on kids. And are we working with our staff to make sure that, I know that they're attentive to the social emotional needs, but, sometimes, I know this as a teacher, that sometimes I get a little stressed that I'm falling behind
Yeah.
where I want to be, so I start applying a little more pressure without really being aware of what the impact might be on, kids, given everything that's going on right now? Are we helping teachers to be able to make those necessary adjustments and, not to feel like they're under pressure to have to hit certain marks, do you know what I'm saying? So that they're not feeling stressed and families aren't feeling stressed.
Yeah, I don't think, we spent probably the better part of the last 2 or 3 years on our social emotional programming initiatives. Like that hasn't gone away. That's still a huge part of our programming. So, that's honestly as important as the academic programming we have going on in the district. The staff that I've talked to, and even the parents, to be honest with you, because they're kind of on the other end helping the students, I think they've actually found this to be a pretty good balance. Okay. The parents, I think, are very, as a whole, very appreciative of the models that we have going. I think the parents that have students who are in the fully remote model are very happy and content with that. The parents that are in the hybrid model obviously kind of wanted that in-person connection, and even though it's 2 days a week and not 5, that's working for them. So I think they've been incredibly supportive, and I think they've also been acknowledging of the staff's time about, just how different it is, and, it is time-consuming, and it's different,
Parents completely recognize the
yeah, I
amount of
think
time
they've
and
been-
effort that
they've
teachers
been
are
very,
putting in.
very good.
Absolutely, 100%.
We've gotten a lot of comments even just about like how more formalized it is this school year as opposed to last spring. Again, everyone was doing the best they could last spring. Totally different dynamic. We left school on a Friday, not knowing we would never come back for the year. So that was tough because you didn't even have contact with people.
Right.
But now, when people are here, even in the second half of the day when the kids are home, the teachers can actually, work in groups and get some time done where their normal schedules didn't allow for that. So no, I think we're still keeping that at the forefront.
This is going to be a really weird time for high school seniors trying to apply for colleges and whatnot. I just can't even
Yes.
imagine what this, this
Yes.
is a very different experience, I'm sure, for them.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I
Tours
spent my
are
weekend
virtual.
doing that.
are you a high school?
Yes, I'm a parent of a high school senior.
Yes.
Not enjoyable at all. We didn't get to go do any of the in-person tours.
Right.
The colleges have adapted. They've been having a great
Yes.
number of, online seminars and stuff. But it's hard, kind of picking where you might want to go without physically being able to go and see it. So, no, it's been challenging. And again, I think there's just this want for like the normalcy that's just not there right now. But I'm hoping that we're getting there.
And I think in terms of that, what you just brought up about how not normal this year is, I think for the most part, one of the most important things we've done is allowed ways for these clubs and activities to transition so that these kids are building their resume and they are doing what they need to do. And I would hope that we continue to be cognizant of the fact that if something can be allowed to be done, then let it be done, because they're building skills that way too, and doing things that they need to do in order to make it into college. More and more important will be that counselor's letter versus the SAT score on an SAT you may not be able to take.
Right.
So hopefully, I think we've done a pretty good job of allowing that, and I'm appreciative of that we've done it.
Well, thank you.
All right, anybody else on learning models? Okay, next, all the updates.
Yeah, no, thank you.
All right, so next thing is,
Talking.
what's that?
That was a lot of talking.
A lot of talking, okay. School committee and superintendent goals. Last week I presented some possible goals for us to adopt as a committee. Again, I tried to kind of keep the same sort of format we've used the last couple of years, concentrating on academic programming, social emotional, and then the financial aspect. And interesting, as we go through the meeting, a lot of what we're talking about is what's in here. So I asked if anybody had any suggestions, send them to me. I didn't really receive any. I did put some measurables. Donna mentioned, having some sort of measurable aspect to the goal, so I did try to do that with each of the 3 major areas. But other than that, I really didn't make any changes, so I don't know if there's anything else that people would like to see change in those, or added, or taken out, or whatever, and then we can also look at the superintendent's goals. We didn't have a chance to do that last week, so we can actually take a look at those. So as far as the committee goes, anything that you have?
Dennis, I just noticed under our mission statement, we have 2018, 2019.
Right.
I'll get my format person.
That's right up here.
I just
Yeah.
Right.
read
disappointed
it
in
three,
that.
4 times. I
Yeah,
just noticed it
okay.
now.
Yep.
We can pull that right up.
All right, any other, I mean, again, we broke it down into academic programming, so, communicating about the learning models, working with local and state health agencies to monitor the current situation, technology, what we just talked about, monitoring academic progress, that's all in that first goal. And then with the social emotional part, evaluating the effectiveness of the programs we offer right now for both students and staff, keeping an eye on the staff as well and their social emotional health. Keeping an eye on our students that need extra programming, so ELL, special education, promoting programs that promote equity and diversity. We've talked about that before. And then, making sure that students have access to transportation, food, services, and all that type of stuff in that category. And then with the financial part of it, monitoring this year's budget, and then planning for next year's budget, keeping in mind all the needs in terms of safety equipment and cleaning supplies, and also, all our facilities. So that's what I got. I don't know if anybody else has any other thoughts.
One of the things that concerns me about this year, because we're going to be focusing just about exclusively on this, is that we're closing ourselves, we have to in many ways, but we're limiting ourselves to our own district and what we're doing in it and so on. In a typical year, we would go to the conference, we would talk with other people, we would do these types of things. If there's something that, maybe we force ourselves in a way to bring an outside view in, some other perspective, or be able to see more than just our district, for us as a school committee, I think that would be important.
And I kind of kept that under our own personal, professional practice goals. I kept the committee engagement aspect.
Where did you
So
put that?
after, like, the 3 major areas is school committee professional
Yeah.
practice goals,
Yeah,
a communication strategy, and engagement in state and local
yeah,
level organizations, like MASC. There's an MASC conference this weekend, virtual. I'll talk about later. I attended the virtual District 1 meeting the other night. So there are things we can do, and hopefully we will continue to do that. So I did keep that in there in terms of trying to interact with other groups besides just ourselves.
right, because at one time we were going to have a workshop, and I think that just kind of fell by
We
the
were planning
way,
that in the spring, yeah.
and so on.
Yeah.
Those type of, okay, as long as you consider that to be what that is.
Any other things on our goals? So if not, we want to vote to approve ours, and then we'll look at the superintendent's?
I think we should look at,
Well,
I think we
just-
should look at the superintendents and then,
Okay, you want to do it
Do it
first and do
together
it
if
together?
you
All
want.
right, that's fine.
Okay.
All right, so you want to,
No, we did very similar. I mean, one of the nice things over the last couple of years is I do think the school committee's goals and the superintendent goals are aligned. So it's not, that we're going off on different tangents trying to work on things, but I think the goals nicely complement each other. And it's, again, consistent. So I have the same format as previous years with our academic goals. A lot, again, is tailored to, this is a one-year plan. So this is basically just taking a look at, how we're going to manage in this particular year. But we're keeping in goal number 2, the focus on the positive social learning environment and all of our SEL work. I think that's going to be critical this year, particularly with making sure that we're keeping contact with our families and our students and they feel connected to the schools. That's going to be really important work. And then, as Dennis mentioned, we can't drop our eye off the ball as far as like our finances and our operations go. We spent a lot of time really kind of getting those in good shape. We're, as much as we've got the school system kind of up and running now with the various learning models, internally here at central office, we have to start to shift over the next week into our budgeting for fiscal '22. So between now and really early to mid-December, we're going to be doing all of our meeting and kind of shifting again to talking about what our next year's concern is going to be. What are the budgets going to look like? What's going to be happening statewide, grant-wide, and even with some of our revolving funds. So that's all going to be happening in the context of kind of juggling and keeping afloat some of the different projects. So we're going to be talking about capital next. We're also going to be, I assume, applying for school building funding again to try to stay in the pipeline. So it's now shifting into a balance of we've got to keep the hybrid and remote learning going. At the same time, we still have a lot of just day-to-day functions of the district that need to keep happening. And that's going to be our kind of balancing act now for the second half of the year. So we were consistent on that front. And again, similar to you with the professional practice goals, we are focusing again. We didn't finish our goal last year on the communication strategy, so that is a significant chunk of our work this year. Again, the budget planning, and we also kept the community and committee engagement with the organizations as a primary practice goal. So I think they complement each other well. I think they're consistent over what we've done for the last couple of years. And if we can manage our way through the school year, which I think we're in very good shape, and I think people are really doing a good job, I think hopefully that'll set us up for a very positive 22. And there's nothing to say that once, we get past the new year and we get a sense for where things are, I think we should start to revisit how we're going to get back into the discussions around the strategic plan. And then where do we now go for the next 3 to 5 years after we're out of COVID? And it's almost, it's interesting because things have changed. So if we had the plan in place, it would have very much changed because of the environment that we're in and the technology that we're now using and what the expectations of the users are going to be. So it's an interesting time, but I think we can spend some of the spring as the school year is closing down, focusing on what we want our next 3 to 5 years to be.
Okay, any questions or comments on the superintendent's goals? I was reading very intently over that.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, do we need to approve your goals?
You can do a motion to do
Our
them both
goals,
together if you want.
we do
you do have
together,
to-
I mean-
You can either do them together or separate, but you do need a vote to
Yeah.
approve them.
Do you want to?
Let's do them together.
All right, sure.
I recommend that the school committee adopt the school committee and superintendent goals for the school year 2020-2021.
Second.
Okay, any further comment or questions on this? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay, 4-0. Okay, thank you. All right, capital planning.
Yep, so we just mentioned, we need to kind of move into our discussions around capital planning. One of the things that I've done to try to help us out, I updated our list of projects, and for tonight's purposes, I want to just kind of, I cut and pasted the report I gave you into Excel just to throw up on the screen, and I just want to walk you through a couple of things, and then it would be helpful if we went through a process of prioritizing the different projects that we're going to put forward. Obviously, we would always like all of our projects to be funded, but if financial constraints don't allow that, we just want to make sure we're all on the same page about which projects we should be advancing and prioritizing. So in the report that was in your packet, anything basically that was colored green for fiscal '21 was a project that was either originally approved or we just got approved at this past town meeting. So I removed those because they're basically going to be funded. So what we're left with are a handful of these red items that have been deferred at least one, if not two, fiscal years. So the first one is, or a couple of them relate to cleaning ductwork and the air distribution systems. This first one is at Byam. The second one is installing a drive on a particular HVAC unit at Chelmsford High School. Ductwork cleaning again at Harrington. Repair of some broken VCT at Harrington and the CAF. Again, these are kind of smaller items. They're just, I think they were small, and that's why they didn't make the list previously. Westlands, again, cleaning some ductwork and air distribution systems. Westlands, a hot water convection unit need to be replaced. Some damaged tiles in the bathrooms at Westlands. And then, if you recall last year, we actually withdrew funding for the school's firewall because we had a new one. So we don't need, it's still on the list, but we don't need to do that. So we'll actually recommend just removing that from the list this year so the number doesn't keep going. We also had deferred the $75,000 worth of funding that would have gone towards those interactive TVs, but we've obviously used grant funds to be able to do that. So I'm recommending we take that off basically, and we don't seek funding for that. The one significant project that we weren't able to fund from 21 was the lecture hall rehab at McCarthy. We did get the funding for the auditorium, but we weren't able to do the lecture hall at the same time. So that is a project that I would like to, but we should discuss moving into 22. Then when we look at fiscal 22, these were the items that were already on there. They're listed by school, but several of them are together. So if you recall, we're going into year 3 of a 3-year plan to upgrade all of our security cameras and infrastructure in the schools. So 2 years ago, in fiscal 20, we did the 2 middle schools. So we did Parker and McCarthy. Last year in 21, our priority was the high school. So this year, it's the 4 elementary schools. So this was a significant number that we really couldn't accomplish in 1 year, so we broke the project down in 3. So completing the project, also because it relates to security, I would view as very important. So I would rank that as a high number. But you're going to see this number listed for all 4 schools because there's a different number for each of the 4. The second big element you're going to see at the elementary schools is Gary and the town have basically, every year or 2, they've been trying to upgrade the door locking hardware in the schools, in the classrooms. This really came into play when we were doing all of our security protocols and whatnot. So this is another security item that I would rank high in the list. But you're going to see this is a pretty significant number because it's listed individually by each school. We had a smaller project at Center School, replacing not the bathrooms themselves, but just some of the bathroom stalls in the buildings. They're the old metal ones, and they've actually just been rusting out. So that's a number to replace them with the phenolic or the really hardcore plastic panels. Then we have the center security. We're carrying 2 line items. One is for replacing boilers at Chelmsford High School. And then another one is renovation and replacement of the tennis courts, which is a big number, 1.2 million at the high school.
Is that just the high school tennis courts or McCarthy in the high school?
Just the high school.
Just the high school.
Yeah, there's actually some discussion about not replacing the McCarthy tennis courts to basically just build out the high school ones with like state-of-the-art courts and demolish the McCarthy courts to make extra parking for both the police department and McCarthy. I think if we had 6 or 8 courts at the high school and they were all new, I don't see the necessity for McCarthy. And I'm a tennis guy, so but I think you could actually get away with just the high school. McCarthy ones really don't get a lot of use anymore either. The parking might actually be interesting, because I know the police could use it, and we certainly could for our McCarthy functions too.
So I'm sorry, but that would be tennis courts, the basketball, and the way it's set up now?
At the high school?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a complete redo of the tennis courts. There were, I don't know if it was 2 or 3 basketball courts,
I think it's
and then
2.
there was something with hockey.
Yeah,
floor
there's
hockey.
Deck hockey.
like a rink, there's
Yeah, deck hockey.
roller hockey, yeah.
Yes, so it was the whole complex being completely redone. District-wide, again, what I'll recommend we defer on the instructional displays, because again, we've purchased basically all of them in this year's budget. That was just a line item that was hanging out there. Harrington, we've got security access. Harrington, we've got the replacement of the door hardware. McCarthy, we have an elevator replacement. And if you recall, we also talked about replacing the exterior lift at Parker on the list. At South Row, it's in line for the kitchen to receive a new hood, ductwork, and exhaust fans. South Row, you then have the security. At Westlands, there's actually 2 line items, and I looked back for 3 years, and I think this was just a mistake. When we get to it, I'm going to recommend removing the 36,432 for the hardware, because I believe we had broken it out over several years. The line item right below that for Westlands is a duplicate line item at 199. So that 36,432, I believe, was baked into the higher number when we were gonna break it out. So, I don't wanna double fund. So when we get there, we can just replace that 36. And then Westlands, is the school that was in line for a, kitchen remodel. Not as significant as Parker. If you recall, I think Parker's cost us in the vicinity of 600 and
Yeah.
something. Yeah, maybe 650. This one here, you've got, school day programming that utilize the kitchen, but they also utilize the kitchen for adult ed programming at night, like cooking classes and things, and you have to separate the two. So there is some work that needs to be done in that kitchen to do that. That's why that was on the list. So these are our projects, and what we have to do is go through the process of basically prioritizing these. But I thought tonight we could just kind of like talk through in general, you know, what people's feelings were on them. And then take out the projects that we know we can defer or we don't want to move forward with, because that'll remove some money right off the bat. And then get a sense for, you know, how you feel we should be prioritizing these projects. I'll obviously give you my 2 cents as we go along. I would again view this, I try to take care of some of the projects that have just been kicking over from year to year, because if you don't get them done, they never get done. And you don't want a project that just bumps from year to year. I then, you know, this year, it's funding-wise, because technology, we're really in very good shape. I'd be prioritizing the safety and security features, which would be the security upgrades with the cameras and also the door hardware. So that's just my 2 cents. I don't know how you want to go about kind of considering it. I don't know if people had general statements first, or?
The plan is not to prioritize tonight, but to ask any questions we might have.
Well, I would do a little bit of both if you can, because we're going to be getting ready to go to the capital committee.
So,
If there's things that we just all can agree on, it'd be easier just to like earmark those. And then if there's things we still have questions on, we can always come back.
Okay, well, I have a question about the lecture hall at McCarthy.
Sure.
How often is that truly used? I remember being there and only going to the lecture hall maybe 2 or 3 times in the entire span of the years I was there. So I'm just wondering what its use is, and how important that is.
I think it pretty much used as a classroom all the time.
Yes.
Well,
Is it now?
Yeah,
Okay.
it is.
yeah,
I mean, well, now, I mean, things are a little different, but that's
Because
really its use. You can do a lot of demonstrations in there if you needed to break out kids. I mean, I used it all the time when I taught there.
Okay.
I mean,
Just
just
wondering.
myself anecdotally, the last time I was there when we were in school, there was a science teacher actually doing like a demonstration in the room when I was there. So I do know it's utilized.
Okay, I'm all for increasing its ability to have better science type of, if that's what it's for, that's great.
and you could use the lecture hall not just for science. I mean, when
I
they're
was gonna say,
available,
I
you can
did
put a
teach
couple
science.
English classes
They're
together.
great, like, it's a great presentation space,
Yeah.
without having to use, like, say, the auditorium, which wouldn't be as big.
Okay.
I would, you know, again, my opinion, I think the security upgrades, including the door handles, those are, for me, 1 and 2. And then getting all this duct work, you know, that we're talking about, heating and ventilation that we've been putting off, getting that, those type of projects from, I guess, from last year that got put off, you know, the heating, also whatever it was, the different units, the RTUs and all, getting those done. I don't know if we need, this is the time to do tennis courts for 1.2 million. I think that maybe can get pushed off for another year, just given everything else that's going on.
You tennis players will just.
And, you know, you tennis players are, you know.
Now, the elevators, do they have to be done? I mean, we,
Well, we did, just so you know, I met with Brian and Gary, Kathleen, and then Melissa, the energy management person, this week when I got back. And we're firming up pricing because some of the stuff can be a year or 2 old, so we want to make sure we go forward with the right price. I do believe we have to do the Parker exterior elevator because that has been kicking around for a couple of years. And it's an exterior elevator, it's more of a lift, but that one, in my opinion, and I think Gary and Kathleen's really has to get done. The McCarthy elevator, the opinion was could be pushed a year, and that, would not have a significant pull on the use. I mean, it's obviously, it's getting used, but they had put some money into just like a repairs to it recently. So I think we should do the Parker exterior,
Okay.
and the McCarthy could get bumped a year if we had to. So I would rank those that way.
Because I went through, I think I did the same thing Dennis did. I, totaled it, and I went security first and then the door code, I think. And then I felt badly we didn't do the McCarthy lecture hall last year, because we could have gotten the chairs, at the same time. And then it would be like the elevators and ductwork. I mean, if I had to pick 5. But the security and the doors to code, those are big ticket
Right.
items. That's in and of itself.
It's like 1.2 just by itself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
1.2 million right
Yeah.
there.
Can I ask, on the high school boiler, is that something that we could apply to MSBA for? Is there, like, that
Yeah,
secondary?
we did talk about that. It's, I think we all agreed in the room, it's not a significant of enough project to basically have it warrant the reimbursement that's involved. Because when you do an MSBA project, you have to pay for the OPM, the project manager, the designer. It basically jacks up the price of the cost, and then you're getting a percentage of that. But based on the South Row roof, it was financially worthwhile to do that, but it still was borderline for like all the extra hoops you have to jump through and pushing it off a year. The savings, I just don't really think would be there.
Is there anything that we could lump together to apply for that accelerator?
On this
program?
particular list, no.
Okay.
Um,
So-
the-
oh, sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say, the only other thing I am looking into, Brian is checking on it for me now, is the cleaning of the ductwork at 2 of the schools. We did do upgrades at both Byam and Harrington this summer to the air handling unit, in that, really, because they don't have a lot in the schools that service the kitchens and the calves. We're just making sure that, because that was cleaned at the time we did that, that wasn't what this was, because they were piecemeal projects at one point. So we're just gonna verify that those are still needed, and I'm just not sure at this point.
With regards to the tennis courts, is there any way that we could put it off and then talk to the Community Preservation Committee about using CPC funds for some of that?
Yeah, I don't honestly fully know the way the CPC funds are used. I mean, it certainly could be a discussion point. I think everyone acknowledges that the 1.2 is a big number even on the town side, and that isn't just like a school
Right.
cost. It really benefits the whole town.
Right.
So, the town typically spends about $3 million on average in capital for a year. So, I mean, that's almost like half of the money. And, school-wise, we usually, put together a list of probably close to $2 million or a little over 2. And we have been receiving about half of the funding, so about $1.5 million. Again, if there's a different department that has a higher need that year, we all work together and make sure that department gets the need met. So there could be a year that we get 1.8 or 2, and then another year that we have to take 1 to 1.2 because someone else needs something. I haven't seen the other towns' requests yet, so I don't know if there's any big ticket items on there. But I don't think it's gonna come as a surprise to anyone that we have to defer the tennis courts.
Wasn't there talk of like doing a project up on the plateau field and kind of like lumping them all together and, doing it
Yeah.
as more of a, I don't know what kind of project you'd call it, but.
That project, I mean, is still worthwhile, and I want to continue on. It got stalled a little bit with COVID, but there was talk about actually making the plateau a multi-purpose sports area, and basically relocating the track to be like a real cross-country track, because we use the track at McCarthy instead, and that kind of stalled, to be quite honest with you, when COVID happened.
Was the tennis
So-
courts part of that big picture?
They weren't necessarily, no. The tennis courts were always a standalone.
Okay.
There was a discussion about, is there economy of scale?
Yeah.
Of if you're gonna do one project, do the other. But I think the tennis courts are easily $1.2 million. The number they were throwing around for the plateau renovation was, I wanna say closer to 2.5. Maybe even like closer to, 2.5, 3 million. So that would be a huge project to
Right, it was
put
like a
together.
bonded project or something.
It would have to be
Yeah,
bonded,
yeah,
it wouldn't be
right,
part of
right,
capital.
Right.
There was some discussion about CPC for that too,
Yeah,
because there was
that's
something
right.
that could be done.
Right, well, and I know that we actually just, I think, used some CPC funds for another purchase in town, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that, but, I'm not sure if, the Warren Farm.
There's the open space in between.
Yeah, some of that
connector,
open
yeah.
space.
Yeah.
I don't remember, honestly, I can't really remember much these days. But, I do want to mention about the tennis courts, though, that it's not really just about tennis, because we have a lot of, youth groups, right? We have basketball,
Oh, yeah.
and so, you know, I know that that there was some concern from that particular group about the courts being in such bad shape that they weren't sure that they could use them. Do we have an alternative for them in the interim while we're waiting for these to get repaired?
Bless you. No, what Gary has been doing is basically every other year going in and doing like just a patch and replacement. And I think, I want to say it's about a $50,000 cost, so it's not cheap to update that, but they basically been limping along. And every other year having someone come in and fill all the cracks and just basically resurfacing and repainting the lines. So that would really be the only other alternative.
I played on the courts this summer, and I will say that it's the best patching job they had done. The tennis courts were, we
No,
played,
the tennis courts, they have done a good job with. I don't think they're putting quite that into the basketball
That's
courts.
okay.
It's the basketball courts, they're just, it is actually a small window where they get used, but they're just, they're trying to keep it going, keep it functioning. They did do a nice job with the tennis
They did a
courts.
nice job.
Yeah.
So how do you want to proceed? Do you want to rank now? You want to have everybody send their top 10 list and come up with a spreadsheet? I know last year what we did, we put a spreadsheet up and then
Right,
people said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that's how we came up with it. Do we have enough time to do that? When are you meeting?
I haven't heard yet, but it's usually after Thanksgiving.
Okay, so we do have another, so we have another meeting, so we can,
Yeah.
I haven't heard from John yet, but I'm pretty sure last year was after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I mean, I have to send them along our list.
yeah.
And if it's prioritized, it's obviously easier
Yeah.
for the discussion. I think if minimally tonight, we could go through and remove a couple of projects that we just know we're not gonna do. And then if we even just talked and said, you know what, yes, we do wanna prioritize the security and all that stuff.
Yeah.
If we can at least float that to the top of the list,
Yeah.
I can quantify that and be able to explain what the numbers are. Just for your sake, what I would recommend is like items 9 and 10, they were the two technology ones, the firewall, and then also the upgrade of the computers. I would remove those from consideration.
Yep.
And just, I'll list them as deferred, because we basically already have that. So I'm gonna scratch those two if no one
Yep.
objects.
And there's another technology one in this current year's one too. We can take out.
Which one's that? Oh, right here. Okay, so we can scratch that. I then just coded the security and the doors as a top priority.
I think I think security by itself is almost 6, and the doors are a little over 6. So,
What, for the security?
yeah, for the security, if you add up all the 4 schools, it's like 598,
Yeah, that's what I got.
and then door hardware is about 633.
Yep, that's what I got.
So, if you lump them all together.
And the lift,
One point
gonna
two
be up at
three
the
two.
top of the list? Do we have?
The Parker one,
Yeah.
I would say, because we talked about it last year, about
Yeah.
maybe
Well,
having
I
to
think
deal with
that
it
they
this
said
year.
we could maybe get one more year
Out of the,
out of the lift.
Yeah, I think this, that year
It's
just
been a
passed.
year, yeah.
Yeah. Again, if that ductwork hasn't been done,
Right,
No.
and the
that
ductwork.
needs, given the current situation.
So we want to get Parker, elevator.
Yeah.
Because that is kind of like a health safety thing,
Right,
too.
that's my, yeah, I
Yeah.
want to make sure that we have good access to the building.
Would it be the same company doing both? Would it be wise to do both McCarthy and Parker?
I don't know, because you know what the funny thing is? I'll have to defer to Gary and Kathleen on this one. It's not really an elevator on the outside of
No, it's a
Parker.
lift, yeah.
It's a lift. So I don't know that it would necessarily be the same company. But they were updating the quotes on both, so I can report that back. You know, we have tried if there's like an economy of scale of doing things like that. I just don't know necessarily that that'd be the fact. Yeah, I mean, so I will, here's what I would do. I would get back to you on some of these smaller ones, you know, the ductwork, the variable frequency drive on RTU 18, ductwork, VCT, ductwork, damage petitions, those are all small.
Right.
We took the technology ones out.
Is a South Row kitchen need to be done in terms of our planning for the food service program? I don't know how much that's being used or if it's planned in
The hood at the South Row kitchen.
a
The
necessity.
hood,
It was a replacement of the hood and the exhaust fan.
right, so, we can do things to make sure it passes the draw it needs to pass, if we can't fund this, just more, maintenance.
How about the
Well,
Western kitchen? Is that a necessity or another project can be pushed to another era?
Yeah, I mean, that's the hard part, like, even, I know we can like push it, but, when you're dealing with like the food and, you know, even just
That's
like,
why I asked,
like
yeah,
health
that's why I
safety
asked. I
type
know,
stuff,
we're trying to
it's,
expand our food service program and,
yeah,
you know.
it's tough to do. Where do you stand on the lecture hall? Is that, you know, something that, is a priority for you?
Not a priority
not
for
a
me, I know.
priority for you?
I don't know.
No.
Jeff. I don't know, but
I think part of the reason why we wanted to get it last year, because we thought we could get a good deal with
Right.
the
Right,
chairs
right.
between the two. I mean, I haven't been in there, I don't know, I've seen pictures of it, I don't know how bad.
wouldn't be a priority for me, I don't know. Donna's shaking her head too, so I don't know.
No, I just think there's other things that are more of a
Right.
priority
Yeah.
at this point.
Like security,
Security
ductwork.
and making sure the
Well,
facilities.
Yeah,
are
the security and that stuff I've already put to the top.
Yeah.
So like now we're just left with these handful of items. I just don't know in what order you
Yeah.
would rank those items.
How bad is the high school boiler?
Yeah, that could be a major problem.
That's why,
It's, yeah, it's,
is it like, it's gonna go on us?
Not this year, right?
no, but it's just like, it's one of those like preventative maintenance
Yeah.
type things, like you want to obviously replace it before it goes. They have several. Gary's looking into that as well.
Okay.
I think whatever we have to do to maintain our facilities would be our next priority.
Right.
Because we're never going to have a pandemic again, not in our lifetime.
Hope not.
Me too.
One's enough for me.
We may not get SBA funding in our lifetime either, so.
Well, what if we did this? I mean, if we step back and look at this, I do think after the security and everything, if we're talking about maintaining buildings, that the kitchens are important. If we're gonna be, you know, producing and serving food, I think that's important. What if we, after the lift, because again, I think that's a life safety issue and whatnot, what if we prioritize the kitchens as
4 or 5.
4 and 5?
That's fine.
With regards to the ductwork, do we have to worry about that in terms of it affecting the air quality in any of the rooms?
That's, no, the ductwork that we have, again, it's really like isolated to the kitchen. That's what I'm gonna go back and figure
Okay.
out if that was already part of the project. And I'll be able to report back to you on that. The McCarthy elevator, I do think we can push out a year. Tennis courts we can push out. Boilers, I'll have a question mark and I'll ask Gary. And then we get into these smaller items, like the urinal petitions and things like that. I'll get hard numbers, but I don't see those, those aren't like budget busters,
Right.
Let me see.
Depends on
where
how
we're
good
at.
Jeff does. All it depends on how good you do at convincing him.
It went so well last year, all things, everyone cooperates.
Yeah.
And John Souza does a great job, and
Yeah.
Paul.
Oh, no, I'm sure.
and all the department heads talk, so.
That's it. Oh.
Like a water?
Joking.
It's fine. Just
You want a water?
give me the universal sign, you'll be fine. Save you from that.
I mean, those petitions probably in the bathroom should be replaced if they're rusting and.
Was that center school?
Is that center?
It looked important.
Yeah, just.
In the bathroom, the thing crashed.
Yeah, and the only reason I said, we didn't necessarily have to jump at that tonight, is that it's just a $30,000 item as opposed to
Yeah.
like a 300,000. But let me just see where we're at now, money-wise. You know, 1.6. So it's, we're getting there, but we're not over the top. Why don't you, let me quantify some of these other smaller items. I think we can all agree that even these top 5-tier projects are the priority projects.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, we've got, the bathroom petitions. The elevator, we can, we'll rank towards the bottom to kind of kick it out a year. The boilers, I'll confer with Gary, and see what we're gonna do with that. Tennis courts will rank at the bottom, kick out a year. And then I'll get updated numbers on these, some of these quicker, smaller fixes. The lecture hall at McCarthy, again, will rank towards the bottom of the list. We still have to carry it because it's on there. We don't want to lose track of it. But why don't we do that? We've at least, kind of prioritized $1.6 million of our top tier items. And then for the next meeting, I'll go through this when I get the hard numbers and what really has to get done. And then put it in order, and then you can, either vote it up or down. If that works. But this is at least, helpful to set the stage.
Right. Any other questions on that, capital? Okay. All right, I believe
That's all I have.
that's all on new business, so, any liaison reports?
I said that I attended last night the high school PTO. They elected their officers, President Chris Lefebvre, the co-vice presidents Beth Morrow and Deb LeBlanc, Secretary Deb Smith, and Treasurer Nancy Poley. And again, their big projects are the after-prom breakfast and Teacher Appreciation Week, and they were planning for that last year, and that didn't happen. And so there's going to be consideration of, it's so hard to decide when we don't know. I mean, it's easy for us to say there'll be no prom probably this coming year, so there's some rethinking that has to go on, so.
All right, anybody else?
Harrington PTO has its meeting November 4th, tomorrow night. On November 5th, EL Council, we will have a meeting right before the EL open house. It will be virtual. If you will recall, we have 4 wonderful volunteers. So our agenda will be bylaws and positions, which is terrific. And a reminder that from McCarthy and Center, Recycle Day is coming up. And it's this Saturday,
Yep.
correct?
Yep, right here in this parking lot.
So I'll let you announce it then. But that's what it is.
Donna, anything?
Nothing.
I went to the council schools meeting, as I mentioned earlier, and, everything that was said earlier, it's amazing how well all the PTOs are working together this year, like the collaboration between the different groups and the events they put on. Proof was in the pudding, I guess, the following weekend, so it was good to see that they're all hard at work, even though we're in these strange situations. As Maria just mentioned, Center School has a recycle day on Saturday here in the parking lot, along with McCarthy. I also had the opportunity to attend virtually the District 1 meeting for MASC, and District 1 is just our area of the state, and they have like 6 different districts and about 30 different school committee members, and a couple of takeaways is everyone's in the same boat as we are. It was interesting to hear that, everybody's worried about what to do in terms of being in a red designation, and I think our Board of Health and everything is a lot more willing to work with us than others where they're just saying, oh, you're red, we're out, a lot of regional schools where one district, goes red and the whole region has to go, much more difficult for school committees to work on that. Another concern that didn't come up this year, tonight, but staffing shortages, try to get substitutes, filling in all the needs for paraprofessionals. Everybody's in the same boat. Nobody can get enough staff to fulfill all their needs, so, that's not different. The other thing I took away is we're in pretty good shape comparatively. There was a lot of districts, believe it or not, that are just settling or have not settled yet with the unions, that don't even have agreements yet with the unions, and obviously that caused a lot of controversy. A lot of districts where, the parents aren't happy with their models. There are a lot of districts that went with an asynchronous remote model, and just it's what it was last spring, and a lot of parents aren't happy. I think with our model and, offering, the live teaching even when you're remote, I think that's gone a long way towards, the parents being fairly happy with what we have. I don't think we've gotten a lot of emails recently, so I think we're doing a good job as a district, and obviously the teachers are doing a great job. And the final thing that came out of it is, if anybody is telling you as a school committee that, they're doing it better over there, they're lying, because over there they're saying they're doing it better over here, because everybody's doing the best they can with what they have. So it was good. It was good to hear some other perspectives and find out that, what we're doing is we're doing a pretty good job. So that was good to go to. This weekend, Saturday, is the big conference, so I know John's going to be our representative for the big convention, but there's also speakers if anybody's interested, and there's login information for that on the MASC site if anyone wants to attend that. All right, any new items? I'm going to just do this to drive Linda crazy, but I know MASC mentioned about snow days and how districts can decide whether they want to do them remotely or not, so I don't know if that's something we wanted to talk about at another meeting.
Yeah.
So I know it's a favorite of yours, so we'll put it on the next agenda, and maybe we'll have a discussion about, how we want to proceed with that, because we're already remote, so.
We've kicked it around a little bit.
Yeah.
I think we're definitely going to talk about it, because we should tell the public what we're thinking about. But the bigger issue I just have, I don't know how we're going to deal with it, is a cancellation because of power. So, if it's a legit snow day, everyone had power, yes, I mean, in these times, why wouldn't you consider just having a remote day? I just worry about how frequently, anytime there's a storm, the town loses power. So that's just one of the things that we're kind of banting about.
All right, anything else? Okay, anybody have any public comment they received during the meeting they want to read in?
I think Hannah had
I didn't
something.
myself, okay.
There was one from Hannah that she wanted read in, Hannah Barker.
Yeah, I
that
think
the
you
one
mentioned it during the,
Before,
yeah, you mentioned it during the meeting, I think,
before the meeting.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to think of.
Well, she asked that it be read, so, and it's only one very short paragraph.
That's Steve, right?
So this is from, do you want to do it?
Nope, I can't
Go
find
ahead.
it, so
This
I'm looking
is
for it.
from Hannah Barker, and she lives on Newton Way. I would appreciate someone mentioning my appreciation for the following. I would like to express my appreciation for the speed and thoroughness demonstrated by Principal Murray and his staff's communications regarding COVID cases at CHS. This is exemplary and should stand as a model for the rest of the district as applicable. Bravo. Additional kudos to the development and deployment of a dashboard. These communications help everyone to appreciate how well we're generally doing, that this virus is real, and while we are all sick and tired of it, it's not gone yet. She made other comments for consideration, and I won't read them all, so you might want to consider some of them.
All right, anybody else?
I would like us to have as an agenda item at some point again, making sure that what we're trying to achieve and that our model and the hard work and commitment of this staff is something that is sustainable. And talk about and consider whether we need to think about giving any, or finding ways to give a little bit more time. I'm concerned about, reading some things that, and hearing some things that people are just getting extremely tired and not knowing whether or not they're really impacting their students. I asked a question towards that this evening, but I think that that's something that's important to return to and to put on our agendas going forward.
All right, anybody have anything else? Okay, so I believe we're going to adjourn to a brief,
We don't have to do it. Oh, it's up to you.
yeah, let's do a brief one just to kind of get a update, executive session, so we'll take a motion.
I move that the school committee end general session and convene into executive session to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation and not return to general session.
Second.
Second, okay. Donna?
Aye.
Jeff? Aye. Maria?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0, okay? Take a quick break
I'll be
and then
right
we'll
back.